And we are live. Hello, everyone.
What's up?
I'm going to pretend like I'm frozen.
Sorry we're late, folks.
Yeah, we have things going a little bit differently this time. I am currently out of town visiting my folks, so we have young Griff over here running the stream.
Running the stream.
Yeah. Which is also why I sound and look like a potato. Well, I look like a potato regularly, but it's why I sound like a potato now. Jesus Christ.
Good start.
Yeah. Today we have a show for you guys of some kind. We'll see how good it is. Let us know how
allegedly.
The quality is. Let us know how the quality is as usual, or if we get any like frame drops or anything like that. If the internet's not good enough, this is a comedy of errors as usual. But today we are going to talk about some topics, some things. I assume.
We have things to talk about.
We have things to talk about. Yeah,
some quite interesting ones this week, actually.
Indeed. I'm joined, of course, by the usual stooges, my fellow fun haters, the people who dislike,
and Cameron, who does not.
You've got a fun enjoyer to balance it out. Don't worry.
No, you're also one of the fun haters now. That's how that works.
Are you?
Oh, am I?
You dunked on the so you hate fun. That's how that works.
That's fair enough. Yep. All right, I take it back.
Yep. So this is the Noise Floor podcast, but we should maybe rename it to the Fun Haters podcast.
That's a much worse name.
It's a much worse.
That is a much worse.
We won't do that.
We lucked out with Noise Floor.
We did.
Yeah.
Shout outs to
Big thanks to Lux for that name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to dive right into today's show. But first and foremost, big thanks to headphones.com for making all of this possible. If you want to support what we do here, consider checking out headphones.com for your next audio purchase. We have links in the description for our forum, our Discord, and also if you want to contribute to the podcast with your suggestion of a topic or a question, there's a forum thread that you can post there, and we have pulled some today from that thread. Also, we have Headphone Show Bingo that is, I believe, pinned. So, I say Headphone Show. It's the Noise Floor Bingo. So that's there. If anybody gets bingo, let us know, and we will end the stream. That's how that works.
We've never done that. Don't lie.
We've never done that. I'm just lying. Straight up lying.
If we did that, we would have 1 hour long streams.
Which would be good. Which would be an improvement.
Well, but
For
then we would
some
only
people.
address one topic.
Also an improvement. Okay.
Also, these masochists stick around for like 5 hours, so...
Yeah. Like, I think we do have a vocal minority of people who are very upset that we do long form content, but I think
I do need to not do 5 hours today, though, because I do.
Yes,
we're not doing 5 hours.
Under 4.
He's weak.
Probably under 3.
Need to not do a full shift.
Yeah.
By the way,
we will
Griffin,
do
peep the thing I dropped in the channel.
Oh,
No, that's just
you being you.
no, that's just me being ornery with ratings for a different reason.
Oh, okay.
We should probably talk about what topics we're going to be talking about.
Indeed. So, first, we should probably also just get right into it, unless there's any other housekeeping. I don't think there is. Yeah. I think we just launched
Other than this stream being brought to you by headphones.com.
Which we already mentioned.
We did forget to say, buy something from them or we will all starve.
That is true.
That's usually what you do, though. So we'll leave that to you.
All right. Let's launch into the headline topic here. We'll do news afterwards, I think, because a lot of folks will start watching the stream and be like, "Oh my god, 3 hours! I'm not going to go through this for 3 hours."
Okay, so just to be clear, am I the one who's pulling up cards now?
You are pulling up cards, my dude. You have the power. You have the keys.
Okay, card is up.
Card
right.
boy.
So this topic comes also brought to you in part by this incredible thumbnail that we have for today's show of Blaine destroying the rating sign. I want to kind of give a bit of context here for why this came up. We've talked about some of the issues to do with ratings in the past, scattered throughout different streams, and we have basically raked poor Sam over the coals. Shout outs to Sam, our good friend, who is the one who kind
X ratings, current
Yeah,
LTT.
exactly, currently LTT. I ran into him just the other day, actually, and also
Was it
gave
when
him
you were
shit
out
for-
buying ham?
No, but it was when Blaine was visiting as well. But I also
Oh.
gave him shit for PRTF because PRTF makes no sense. But also this is, I want to ensure that folks understand that this is also we mean this constructively. Blaine means it destructively, but the rest of us mean it constructively.
I'm only destructive to members of the community. I like the industry mostly.
Okay, sure. Anyways, point being, there's been that criticism, but I think there's now also just some general stuff that we want to talk to, and maybe this is a good place for all of our general grievances to do with ratings.
I don't think we have
Yeah, I
time.
mean, we should.
We probably don't have time for the whole thing, but like,
Yeah. We should start with the inciting incident.
well, I just
which
want
is the new-
to note before that, ratings is also a place that I would say many in the community probably don't pay that much close attention to, but the much broader sort of like category of people researching audio stuff, headphone stuff in general, ratings is probably one of the earlier sites that people are going to come across measurements for. So the reason why we are basically taking shots at ratings here, and it's because this is such a accessible and ubiquitous platform that actually does a very good job of visualizing and presenting data in the sense of it's compelling and clear. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct or good, but from a visual strategy standpoint, they seem to have done a good job there. And I would say the same thing about the article. What's that?
I was going to say, ratings is the gateway to objective audio
It's the
data for
gateway.
many people.
For many people.
And when that data is problematic, that then is a problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what we're going to tackle today is a recent, fairly in-depth article that they published, which was brought to our attention courtesy of Sean Olive. Shout outs to Sean Olive, our good buddy. And he, I think he seems to be more okay with it than we are. But the article, I get the sense from his commentary, but basically the gist of the article is that there is no single correct target curve, or we shouldn't be chasing one singular target curve because preferences hit multiple different target curves. And this is something that is somewhat congruent with the things that we've been saying on this topic for a while, but the way that they got there is potentially a bit dubious and doesn't actually justify the conclusion that they have. Is that a succinct or fair encapsulation of that, Blaine?
I mean, yeah, I would say that their data is basically, by my assessment, noise. So they may have come to the correct conclusion, but they have not reached it correctly, in my opinion.
So I've not read through this article sort of properly yet. And I imagine many people watching this won't have done so either. We'll have a link to it. There is a link to it in the live chat at the moment, and there'll be one in the description later as well. Can one of you guys give a sort of brief explanation of what it is that this article is doing, saying what the conclusion is, just so that people are up to speed?
So this article
link
is
to the description. Blaine, you go ahead.
So Ratings acquired an HMS like what now, 10 years ago almost? Very long ago. They've had the head acoustics mannequin from the start, basically. They recently, and by recently I mean like what, a year and a half ago, acquired a 5128 and I think also a 45CA. Now the 45CA doesn't play any role in this, but they're basically talking about how do we implement the rating/Harman target on the 5128 because the measurements don't necessarily match between the 5128 and the HMS. Their jumping off point is weirdly a paper that incorrectly references a target I made, which is the Sense Lab paper. They took the target I made for Amir back in 2019 or wherever, and then did it wrong because they used a 3 point per octave PEQ or something like that.
And
It
this
was
was
like
when
it was
Amir
like a
was-
31 band EQ or something like that.
And this is when Amir was trying to learn how to use the 5128, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Yes, but
canonically,
importantly, the curve that Ratings used was not that AP 2018 Harman. It was the average of the highest preferred curves in that study.
Yeah.
Just so
and
people
it should be noted that that average of curves is not actually representative of some of the underlying data, because we have evidence that indicates that several of the centers of the frequency bins were shifted. But this is a
Yes.
completely separate complaint about a completely separate work. So they took DF plus 10 dB octave tilt, wonder whose fault that is. They took so-called Harman plus tilt, which included a bass shelf as well as that. And they took the Ratings speaker target. I'm not actually sure if they say how that was derived, but I think they just applied their speaker down tilt to the DFH RTF. So they took all of those and they gave...
And then they had a low anchor.
Well, yeah, which was just the Sense Lab target with a bass cut.
Yeah, they just made something purposely bad, it seems.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is a low anchor works.
So then they did a listening test, and by the sound of it, they say they have, I think, 35 listeners and 350 individual tests. So it sounds like each person probably did each one twice. That's not necessarily the case. It may have been that there were some who did more and some who did it only once, but they did say that they have over 30 listeners, which is nice because it's a fairly large body of them. But it's not a huge number of actual listening tests, which I think is probably where the trouble starts. They came to the conclusion that the mean ratings of all of the targets that were not the low anchor were basically the same. I mean, they vary by less than 1 full point, and the standard deviation is well over 2 points. So they're like, okay, these are all tied. Ratings' conclusion is therefore that people prefer different things, and there's a need for a range of different targets, which isn't something that's necessarily wrong. But their conclusion is not valid inference, because they've only come to that conclusion because they have incredibly noisy data. Like when legitimately, the lowest result and the highest result are within 1 standard deviation. So
Can you understand? Can you explain for people who don't understand why that's a problem? Why that's a problem?
Well, I think if you show the plot, it may also highlight why taking a median or a mean from this may not be representative. But yes,
I can try that.
Use window capture.
Just make sure I don't have Discord open.
Or anything else.
It's just Discord on this machine.
Yeah, I think it's Discord in general right now. I'm trying to post the picture into our content Discord, and it's not working.
No, just use a browser, like open it up in browser so you get the full screen.
Is that what we're looking at?
So, standard deviation for the people who haven't taken high school stats in a while is, of course,
it's very
very zoomed in.
Zoomed in, yeah.
Top left corner.
Is it?
Maybe zoom out a little bit. Yeah.
We're echoing.
Hold on.
I'm a robot.
Is that better?
No, what have you done? Now we just
Am I a robot?
Hold on.
In
You guys
OBS,
hear
you
me
might
as a
need to
robot?
resize your Windows capture.
Okay, just go back. Go back.
Oh wait,
to
hold on.
everything.
No, I see it. Hold
You've
on.
broken everything.
Am I still a robo boy? The chat says I'm a robot. Do you guys hear me as a robot?
Sound fine to me.
Is that any better? It should be on top of it.
We're in the center now, at least. Yeah.
We're still a robot. Okay. First of all, I'm blaming Apple for this. Second of all, I'm blaming Young Griff. This is Young Griff's first attempt at OBS, so.
Yeah, I mean, give him a break.
Yeah.
Mute the screen capture.
Data?
That's it. So the screen capture is capturing audio right now.
Yeah, probably.
That better?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Hopefully.
Normal now. Yep.
All right. Good stuff.
Sick.
People are saying
Add
it adds
soundstage.
to the screen.
Okay, so to take a very brief bit of stats, standard deviations are a set of essentially percentiles in data. They're based on a distribution around a bell curve. Not everything is a bell curve / a normal distribution, but standard deviations are a fairly normal measure of just how variable your data is. In the case of this, it would be between approximately the 17th percentile and the 68th, so about 60, that's a little higher maybe, but so it's like 50-ish percent, 60-ish percent of the data falls in this range. When standard deviation is large, that means that the data values are varied. So if I have a mean of 6 and my values are like 6, 6, 6, 5.9, 6.1, 6, 5.9, 6.1, my standard deviation will be very low. I can also have a mean value of 6 with 10, 0, 2, 8, I think it needed another like 4 there. But then I'd have a quite high standard deviation. The ratings data is the latter case. Indeed, it's actually more distributed than anything I've ever seen from an audio listening test. It's quite strange.
Achievement unlocked.
Now, do you think, Blaine, that that's the result of them not having done sufficient actual tests, even though they have lots of subjects?
That is my conjecture. Because of the number of tests they're claiming being 350 or over 350, but we don't know how much that is. But sure. 350 is the floor of what they're claiming, and because we know they had 35 people used in it, that sounds like each person rated each target once, seemingly with each song.
Right.
Like one, and that's not
insufficient.
Ideal. Yeah. It seems to have been insufficient, and the proof being in the pudding of this data is very noisy.
Right.
If you look at the stuff you get from Sean Olive's work, for example, I mean, like in the segmentation paper, I know we talk about that too much. Bingo for people who have that. He actually had to expand the scale because people were rating on effectively a scale between something like 30 and 75 or 80 points, because people usually use a fairly limited range. And that was for things with much more varied FR than existed in this test. Yeah. So for this test to have this kind of a spread is odd.
And this to me kind of
and when he says the spread, he means from 0 all the way to 10.
Yeah.
For those who
so this kind of speaks to the reason why this stream is currently titled "Doing Good Research is Hard," because these are things that probably folks just didn't think about when they were kind of setting this stuff up, right? Like to minimize noise in the data.
Yeah, I mean it's something that if you look at any of the past research, we know that listeners who are untrained are meaningfully less consistent. That's why you need more trials with them, which is actually Sean's original argument for why you need trials or why you need training to make listening tests efficient.
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems like they've got the table just below that, what we were looking at there, arguing that the results are statistically significant, but the p-values don't seem to make sense. Why are they suddenly going from 0.002 to 1?
Yeah, I was wondering about that one as well. I have to assume that p-value 1 there is either a typo or, I mean, that can only, of course, occur when there is like an absolute non-correlation, right?
An infinitely poor correlation. Like that doesn't,
so
you can't get that. So that
so no, every one there is clearly an error.
So
how that happened, I don't know.
Yeah, for those who don't know, the p-value is something which is used to basically tell you what the statistical likelihood of something occurring is versus just pure chance. If the p-value is 0.05, it means there's a 5% chance of that happening effectively. So for it going 1 means it's guaranteed. Well, it's not guaranteed.
It's infinitely unlikely.
How is it going? Yeah, it's infinitely unlikely, which doesn't make sense in this context at all.
Well, no, it's it's infinitely likely. Sorry, it's
infinitely likely.
A high p-value is higher chance of chance. So,
Yeah.
but I don't actually know how you can get, like, you will get a higher p-value than that if you just correlate two samples of random sequences.
Yes.
Because everything has some apparent correlation just due to chance. So my guess is either A, their formula targeted the wrong cells in Excel, or there was some sort of an error. But the ones that they are, and actually, are they making inferences off of that one? It seems like they are. Actually,
not sure. But basically, yeah, for those unaware, you'd want to see a low p-value, ideally below 0.05 is sort of the general guideline, but realistically you want lower than that, just to say that your results are statistically significant and that you're not making conclusions or sort of anything from actually data that doesn't really tell you anything, that could have just been chance or luck. And the fact that many of those values are just showing 1 is weird. So it seems like there's an error of some sorts there, which then calls into question some of the other results as well. So I don't.
Well, and it's an error which seems to power their analysis, because the only ones for which we have valid p-values are comparisons of low base and other
that's
things.
true, actually.
And all of those p-values are the ones that are under 0.5.
So all of the comparisons between the different curves that weren't just low base variance, we don't actually know if they're statistically significant. And based on the data that you've looked at, it seems like it's too noisy to be statistically significant.
I mean, it would be very difficult for it to be statistically significant because, again, the standard deviation of the data is a meaningful multiple of the actual range of the means.
And they've not published the underlying data, right?
No. I mean, technically you could scrape it because they have all of the data in the scatter plot, but oof, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, Derek's saying it's probably a 0.95 rounded, but even if it was, that would mean that it's terrible. So
I was going to say 0.99 repeating.
Yeah.
Getting away from p-values, I'll show you my p-value if you show me yours.
Another thing that they cited in that as their evidence is that 63% of participants picked the same EQ curve as their most preferred when listening to both music clips, which further reinforces that there were probably only 2 trials per person, and also is not actually very good coherence.
I just want to bring something up from chat. Pants Tucked In brings up something that I think maybe is a misconception here.
Good name.
Which is, you were talking about like Harman trained listeners versus untrained, and the suggestion is that, but isn't Harman training also grooming, such that, like, I think for people, they think that if people go through the Harman training to become a trained listener, whether it's
let's be
like
clear,
Harman
the sexual elements of the Harman training are not something we should defend.
I don't agree with that. I think so. Like, this is something though that I have seen come up, which is that, of course they're going to rate the Harman stuff higher because they've undergone a framing or a conditioning to, prefer that, right? Whereas if they were just, left to their own devices, they might prefer something else.
That's not really what it is.
How to listen does not actually have much. Well, you can reasonably say that how to listen may bias people towards certain things they look for that might potentially have an effect on what they prefer, or at least what they identify most effectively. So there is a possible effect here. However, there is no actual inclusion of a target curve in how to listen. How to listen is basically just identifying a bunch of EQ filters.
So that's, I think if anything, it's something like it causes you to kind of flip your brain into that mode of analysis where you're identifying different frequency ranges rather than, let's say, the subjective effect or qualia. We're getting very close to bingo again. Where a lot of people, when they first put on a headphone and they listen to it, they are compelled by things that are unrelated to that. Whereas when you're actually going through the identification process of like what the different ranges are and EQ filters are and stuff like that, that has this sort of breaking of the spell effect that might bias somebody towards an evaluation that corresponds with that, rather than an evaluation or a judgment about a product that is like all about the soundstage, for example. Using that as the,
Mark's got quite a good analogy in chat, actually. It's like asking people to pick favorite cars. At first they pick based on comfort, then you teach them how to drive, and now they pick different cars.
There you go. right? Or maybe it'll be how it looks, right? Stuff like that. And then you actually sit them in and show them how to drive, and they have different preferences. So it might be, I think it is grooming in that sense, but it's not in the sense of like pushing people towards a target like the allegation so commonly is, Anyway, that's neither here nor there. Back to the ratings thing. So basically, the conclusion here is that there's no there in terms of this, again, very well presented article.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. To bring this to the bigger topic at hand about the challenges in doing good research, what should they have done?
Had more trials by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, here's where I would start, right? And this, I think, is where this fell down, is that they didn't start with replicating a prior result with a new methodology, because they are using a new methodology, right? So if you're doing a new test process, and this is different from how Sean has done stuff, this is novel, you would probably start with saying, okay, well, here's two things that have been tested fairly rigorously in prior work. Right. Let's see if our result coheres with that, and if we're capable of discriminating to the extent that prior work was, right? Like, are we able to find that people strongly prefer the Harman target to DF or free field? Like a very easy result to replicate. Or some other kind of Sandy test, basically. Something to say, are we capable of differentiating anything with this test methodology? But they've just sort of jumped directly into using this test methodology, and then the results that we got aren't really interpretable. Like, not because they didn't test things, but because, in fact, this system probably would not differentiate any of the target curves used by Sean Olive in his original paper on target curves, even though his paper did, even though a lot of the Harman papers do, even with fairly small population sizes.
Right. So is there a takeaway here other than just like we need to do more and better research, or is there anything that you would sort of glean from this?
Well,
even
I
if it's
think
not
that
their
there's
conclusions.
Well, I think that what we glean from this is, I mean, obviously it's hard to do good research, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I actually think that this is a case of a publication that, like, if I were someone who didn't hold the prior beliefs that I do, like, I do believe that there is a variation of what people prefer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I didn't believe that, if I was someone on the other side of that debate, I would be like, this article is worse than nothing because it's used invalid methodology to get an incorrect result. The reason that we're kind of inclined to pull punches is because we think its result is correct.
Even if it's not for the right reasons. It's a Gettier case.
Yeah, exactly. So and honestly, the level of statistical analysis that they did for the actual population and data points they had is really bad practice. Sean has done this before as well, and I have some issues with it then too. But breaking it out into demographic segments when you have 35 listeners, each of which had possibly as little as 2 trials per thing. Also, as Sean noted, none of the graphs have fucking either A, standard deviation, or B, 95th percentile variation plotted on them. And if they did,
some of them
everything
also
would
use
look
different axes scales as well.
That's probably just an Excel thing. Excel likes to change your axes.
Yeah, that's true.
I hadn't even noticed that, but you're right.
Just a comment from the chat here. Yakucho says, why do ratings use that weird target? Maybe there is a bit of...
Which one?
They have several weird targets.
Yeah.
So should we go over some of just the general...
I actually also have one further complaint, and this is about data representation. I posted a graph in the chat, in our chat, and can you just possibly, Griffin, pull up their image of the HMS versus the 5128 for the HD 600, and then the scraping of those two measurements. Yeah.
Don't break the audio.
Okay, so wait, you want their image and then your image.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on.
And I mean, Should we also go over the issues with their soundstage thing again, or we have beaten that
We've
horse?
covered that, I think,
Yeah.
a few times. That one,
We
there's
have.
many problems with, which we've talked at length. I think it's fair to say that there's very little reason to pay attention to it, and its continued use should be reconsidered, I think.
And yet people still do.
All the time.
Yeah.
Nice mug,
I
by the
mean,
way.
This kind of comes back to what I was saying at the beginning, where it's like the problem is here. It's if you have objective data, especially when it is presented nicely, as RTINGS does, this is the gateway for many people, and people who are just getting into this are going to go to the easiest to access and look at source. They're not going to watch a 3-hour podcast of people explaining why different methodologies or different methods of statistical analysis are better. And so they're not going to understand what the problems with either the soundstage measurement or this article is. And I don't really know what the solution to that is. It's just one of those problems where if you have good presentation and good SEO and you are the sort of front face of audio objectivity for many people just getting into it, I would say you have a responsibility to do better, but there's not really any way to sort of enforce that.
Yeah. So it probably just requires
we could
us
enforce
continuing
it with violence.
We need to continue to yell.
Always
and
the
scream
violence with this one.
until it
I
actually.
crave a monopoly on violence.
Using very specific language there.
Yeah.
Here, let me pull up that graph for you, Blaine. So that's their visualization that should be on the stream right now.
Blaine equals Liam Neeson.
And
he has a particular set of skills.
So I scraped that data, those exact plots, which look quite different, right? They are much less different than they look. And some of that difference is probably explicable simply because one of them sealed better than the other. Like the low frequency
so now
variation.
One of them is, sorry, now the graphic is yours. Your trace.
Yeah. And I probably should have used their same colors. My apologies on that one. But you would not necessarily, unless you were very used to graph sniffing, intuit that these two match as well as they do, were it not for, because they've used a different scale, they've used a different aspect ratio. And honestly, I don't know if this was deliberate or not, but it gives the impression that there is a much larger difference between HAT's measurements of over-ear headphones than actually exists. That's not to say there's no difference, but it is much larger, is much smaller than people are giving it credit for. And frankly, I don't think that they're no, actually, I'm going to go further. I would be very confident that if they compared equalizations based on those two things, their methodology would be completely incapable of differentiating them. I think even Sean's listening tests would have some difficulty differentiating them.
By the way, is our audio still okay, guys?
I think so.
Did someone saying all hail robots?
All hail, Blaine.
Okay.
Now we're
they might be
talking.
talking about the Hatses.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Now we're fucking talking.
The Sim channel says Dan Clark had a presentation where he said it's not clear how soundstage imaging resolution and black space are measurable. I haven't seen that one.
I think black space is a reference to the much older meme of the black background.
Oh, right.
The premise that there is some inherent grain to some things, analogous to film grain or visual noise.
Signal to noise?
Well, no, because people attribute it to transducers. So the concept is that there's a difference of... You heard this a very long time ago with T50RPs. The concept was planars had a blacker background. At the time, I think the answer was basically that they had less treble, right?
I thought that this was also in relation to balanced amplifiers, balanced outputs.
I have never heard black background in the context of that, but perhaps this is an older meme. So this is something that you really. So Hobby Talk says planars have less treble. Yes, in that era they did.
Yeah, in the T50RP era. So Dan is right in that sense that we're asking about measuring things separately from frequency response that there is no metric for. Yes. However, it, at least in my opinion, is becoming clearer that certain of these subjective qualities that are correlated I think you can. I think you can look at a frequency response and say that's going to sound more spacious than this other one, right? Like I think you can
You
make
can't
that
do it for yourself.
for
There's
yourself. Yeah,
definite, yeah.
I would
there's
want.
definitely
I would
trends.
want to
it's
test
harder.
that.
It's harder for other
I
to like
would-
say. It's harder to make a prediction, right, for other people.
I would say it's effectively not possible
because you
actually.
can't guarantee where attention is going to go for people and what that's going to contribute. And then also,
or just how a certain coloration will be heard qualitatively as opposed to quantitatively. So like
exactly,
for example, with
yeah.
something like the HD800S, like some people are going to hear the mid-range recession as the upper mid-range being farther away than the lower mid-range, which is comparatively closer. But another person might just hear the comparative closeness of the low mid-range and feel claustrophobic because of it.
I also think that like over a longer,
no
like if you have a much higher sample size, you can probably get closer within a controlled group over time. You can
Joel
probably
in chat says, "Is Andrew saying Soundstage is just a 2K dip again?" Yes, he is, Joel.
I've never said that. I've never said that. I
think it definitely contributes to it, but
yeah, it's a frequency. It's a relationship, right? It's a frequency.
I think the opposite coloration can engender a similar effect, though. Like again, it's not. I don't think it's a phenomenon of the devices themselves as much as it is the listeners.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, because you can also say that there's other factors like the psychoacoustics of a headphone being open, for example, that could influence somebody's perception.
Yeah, and I mean, even if you just look at the sort of HRTF effects of like direction, I mean, don't go as far as an OAE one from Grell or something, but like just look at the sort of directional effects. And it's not just that 2K area. That 2K area is quite pronounced in how that changes, but there are other ones as well.
Yeah.
6K. Weirdly, I found that the 2K dip, because I've had problems with it in the past where there's been headphones which I really like it on because it does seem to make things more spacious, but it does take away from timbre. It is a colorational distortion. I found that by going with a slightly different shape than with what many headphones tend to implement, you can kind of get a happier middle ground between the two, like still keeping sort of 80% of the spaciousness effect without as much of a perceptual effect on the tonality itself. But it's one of those things where there's not exactly going to be research done on this particular aspect, and so it's going to be fairly anecdotal for a long time to come.
So just to annoy Blaine, the Sim channel says, I think with black space he means silence between the notes in the time dimension.
Well, I mean, again, that coheres with the premise that it's a low pass.
Yeah, I guess.
Set your low pass earlier, you're going to have less, anything that would be post ringing.
Anyways, back to the topic at hand. Sorry to derail.
I know. Let me just an anecdote. I remember when people used to say planars had better impulse responses on Tyle Hertzen's rig because planar designs at that point very seldom had. They had and ear gains specifically. They were very close to acoustically flat on average. So it's like, oh, the impulse response looks so much better. It's like, well, yes,
on a flat baseline.
It's wrong. Yeah.
People talk about the same thing with DACs, where you see DACs with like NOS DACs or something advertising no ringing. People saying that as a good thing. It's like it's because it's rolling off treble. It's like, oh well, I just EQ up the treble. It's like, okay, well now you have ringing again. So
yeah.
Hey, did you see recently somebody was talking about how purple fuses make a difference?
Marked in chat says EQ made my relationship more spacious. Oof. That's rough, buddy.
I hope that works out well for you.
Thing?
Oh, somebody was referencing you in I think it was in Water Cooler, saying how if you couldn't hear it, then it must be false or must be.
Oh right, okay. Oh well, that's a nice compliment, I guess.
Really?
No, right, but that was repudiated because somebody was saying they could hear a difference in the fuses that they were swapping.
Yeah,
well, clearly they can hear up to 24K then.
That's for the fuse. That's the fuse band between 21 and 24. Anyway,
yeah,
I'm sure we will
back to the
later topics.
Back to the ratings stuff. I mean, I think we've covered why it is not necessarily useful data.
Well, I think that there's also a methodological error that even if the data were more robust, would still exist, which is that having found a statistical tie amongst the curves, they conclude that different people prefer different things. And their basis for that is just that there's a correlation, and it's not an especially strong one, between the ones that they picked on the two songs. That is not necessarily indicative unless individuals who were rating one curve higher were rating the other ones lower.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if they're all within a statistical tie of each other, and if they're all in the statistical tie of people's ratings, then you can't say no one curve is right for everyone. All you can say is all of these curves were well preferred. But that doesn't mean that one isn't necessarily better. That just means that one of them has not stood out in this test.
Right.
And so there's the pluralist conclusion they've come to here, I think, is one that they kind of wanted to come to at the start, which is probably why they went into the analysis this way. And obviously we agree with it. So I think we actually need to be extra critical of the bad reasoning on there, because
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
because that agrees with our priors.
we can't. I mean, like I've mentioned this as well on Twitter that, like, you know, the outcome here is just further justification for you know, preferences, showing the stuff as a range, right? But to your point, we can't just say that, right? Because that's what we think is true.
We can't
right?
just take any experiment that seems to confirm our existing beliefs,
exactly.
regardless of how bad his methodology is. Like that's the opposite of what we can do.
Exactly. So I do think it's worth, you know, applying that kind of scrutiny to this analysis. And it also, I mean, like in a sense that I'm kind of thankful that they still did it, because it is kind of like an exercise in being like, okay, no, like we need to be more rigorous and careful with like how we inevitably do this kind of thing, or whoever is doing it.
What I wish they had done is done this with 5 people and seen if they could actually differentiate, like, again, some of the target curves that Sean Olive has tested, and where we have pretty high confidence that people don't like one and do like another. Like, I feel like this is an example where they spent probably a meaningful amount of time and effort on this, and it's kind of a shame because it's kind of been a waste.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, they probably won't see it as a waste, and the majority of people who come across it will read it and go, okay, this is justification for ratings, this methodology, thumbs up, right? Like, I don't think they really care what we have to say on it, quite frankly.
No, we'll find out. If whoever's been in charge of this wants to come on to talk about it, we'd be happy to have him.
Yeah, I would love to have Pierre on. Actually,
there is an author there,
Pierre Levier.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the person behind this, but that's the person who put it together. Yeah.
That is an absolute butchering of that poor man's name.
Rob says, what about the pursuit of happiness? This is something that we are all struggling with, and we're not sure if it exists yet. So
I'm just chasing Nirvana.
the worst band from the 90s.
They really are. It sucks so much coming from Washington, because at least when I was growing up in the early 2000s, it was like Nirvana fucking everyone. I'm like, this is so fucking mediocre.
Yes. Okay, so let's. Should we move on, or is there anything further to go?
Well, I mean, there's the whole back half of the article, which is none of this gave us anything useful, so we just decided here's our target.
Yeah. Well, I mean, ironically, I actually think that that's the better conclusion. Like
I do too, and the target they chose is actually fairly reasonable. As far as,
but they could just have skipped the front part.
Yeah, because I mean, it is essentially what they were doing prior to this, which is just basically taking the difference between the Harman target and the DF of that head and applying what is essentially those filter values to the diffuse.
But did they use the measured or did they use the calculated?
Well, no, they use the official DF, the one
the official measured one.
Yeah. They use the measured one. It's 2 dB brighter in the upper treble.
It's not a very large difference. Particularly, and I'll point this.
I don't know.
Well, I was going to mention the whole the DF slope thing, which you were calling me out for, but I don't think that's why they used it, because we aren't I think it's fair to say that that's because of Chronicle's DF or tilt plus slope methodology, right?
I would assume it was due to Sean's inclusion of it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well, I mean, if you're doing scientific research, I would assume they're looking more at Sean than clinical. But
we shouldn't think of it as like target necessarily, just really, really coarse grained, you know. And people
on the note of coarse grains, I'd like to point out that they started with a 1/3 octave HRTF, then applied filters to it, and then smoothed it to 1/6 octave.
Yeah. Just
which is a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Really sanding down all the points there.
Yeah. Anything else to go over with that?
I do want to shout out that they did make some good changes to their site on the heels of this, because this wasn't just like their test. It was like a new test bench, which for those who actually do follow the site, it does kind of affect how the published reviews and articles end up changing. So now they show the frequency at which normalization was applied. So like the zero crossing of the measurement in the sound profile box that's on the reviews, instead of having to click through, you can see that, which is nice. All of the frequency response, all of the frequency response measurements are taken at a standardized volume now and 94 dB SPL, which is complying with an IEC standard, which is good. They replaced the terms bass, mid, and treble accuracy, which I think is actually to target compliance, which I think is a really good change, actually. I think it brings a level of nuance that wasn't previously there to a lot of the people who are visiting this site who are not already part of like our insane little corner of the community. And they're replacing the standard error because it's like no longer an accuracy score. They're changing that to RMS deviation. They're penalizing small deviations to a lesser degree because they believe, in my opinion, rightfully so, that very small deviations aren't a huge deal. And then the peaks and dip metric that they use is now being included in the neutral sound scoring, which, I mean, I always advise people not to really care too much about that scoring anyway, because unfortunately it does still include that absolutely garbage soundstage metric. But it's an improvement, and I think it's worth, after dunking on them for a fair bit, to acknowledge where they are actually improving. And another place they are actually improving, I don't know if you guys have been paying much attention to this, but their graph visualization has been dramatically improving over the last year or so. And they're still doing, their same targets and, their default view being compensated to their target, and then raw graphs below that. And they still have some things to work out in terms of like types of visualization. But I do want to give credit where credit is due. Work is being
Chad
done.
is talking about whether temperature affects the sound of headphones now.
I think we've talked about that.
I mean, it would.
Briefly.
For multiple reasons, actually, but...
Yeah.
Someone says, is there an objective measure of the resolving power of headphone drivers?
There's not even any
resolving power of your
brain. Any robust evidence. There are anecdotes that suggest it, but we do not have any test that indicates that it exists.
It's funny though. Like the more I think about this stuff, the more crazy it seems that we would think of it like that. Like that there is a special resolving power of driver metric or something like that.
Well, I mean, I think it comes from the premise that there's resolution of visual content, right?
Yeah, I know. It's like you're making a comparison, but I mean, that's a horse that we've also, that horse is dust at this point.
Yes.
Capra says sweat improves seal. Technically correct.
Yeah.
Don't like that.
There was a question. Sorry. Sabine says, is SPL just dB volume level? Decibels are a unit. They can measure sound pressure, which is what SPL is. They can measure voltage. They're just a relative scale, which is logarithmic. But yes, in functional terms, yes, it's just the sound pressure in dB.
Okay, let's move on.
Any other kvetches about ratings before we move on? I think we're good.
No, but someone asked something in chat that I want to fight with.
Okay.
Archie says, do square wave measurements measure the punch/slam of bass?
At some point, you can just say yes and move on.
Well, I'm not going to say yes because it's not fucking true.
I know.
Well,
so
okay, hang on. Not in the, sort of the way that I think he's asking it, but technically you can derive the frequency response from a square wave measurement, and therefore could
you can
infer...
derive the response at the harmonic series of the fundamental.
Yes.
That's the only response you can derive with a square wave.
Yeah.
So it's
okay. So can I get slam from impulse response then?
If you were
From
going to
impulse
find
response,
slam, you'd probably find it in step response. Of course, these are all the same.
Let's just stop confusing people though, because they now think that you're talking about a separate metric that's in addition to frequency response at the end.
We're not. It's all
genuine answer though. No, don't use square wave measurements to try and infer whether something is punchy or slammy. That's a bad idea.
Frequency response.
It is just a measure of frequency response. Also, just for contextualization, square waves were historically used for measuring high frequency behavior of amplifiers in the era before we had FFTs. Like, their purpose was never to observe low frequency behavior. Anyway,
moving on.
Other kvetches with ratings.
I mean, I think that. I mean, like, I don't like their imaging score, but like, there's a lot that you can flog there. I don't like the weighted harmonic distortion. Actually, that's another thing I don't like. I don't like that they have distortion.
The horse is rotting at this point.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying. So, no, this is a serious take, and this is something that I think that we should probably hold ourselves to as well, because normal people don't know how to read this shit.
Mm-hmm.
If your data has visible intrusion of mains harmonics, you shouldn't be publishing it. Like, there are people who are like, oh, why does everything have a peak in distortion at 30, 60, 120, etc. hertz?
Are people really analyzing it to that granular of a level, though?
I mean, it depends, but if it's something that is visible in the data, it's actually one of the few visible noteworthy features of the data.
How have they got mains leakage in their distortion measurements?
So the reason there is because they have at least when I talked to Sam, and I actually talked to him about this when he was at ratings, and I was like, you really need to put a phase splitter very close to the start of that run so that you have a differential signal. But they have a really long single-ended run from the head to the interface. So they have a really long, high impedance, single-ended connection.
So it is just straight up picking up noise.
Yeah, that's what it seems to be at least.
Right. Here's a potential hot take from Joel, and I'm curious what you guys think on this. Distortion measurements for headphones should be pass-fail metric. Should be a pass-fail metric.
Blaine approved.
That's good.
Yeah, honestly, I would say
don't show them the data. Don't show them a score. Just good or bad.
Distortion pass, distortion fail, and that's based on
thumbs up, thumbs down. That's it.
Cameras.
I still find distortion measurements sort of interesting to look at. The problem with headphone distortion measurements is that there's never been a time where I've looked at them and the frequency response hasn't been the more important factor.
Right.
Like,
well, okay. So
okay, great. It would be nice if this particular area was 0.5% lower or something, but
there are also situations where you might want to say, like, hey, this is an area, like, it's not going to be audible under normal circumstances, but if you're playing it if you're using an EQ, for example, it's going to reduce the volume threshold for where you're going to get clipping from driver excursion or something like that. And you can actually visualize that with harmonic distortion, where you could
visualize it with like a maximum linear, like you could just have this is the maximum linear SPL.
You could do something like that.
Speakers have this.
Yeah.
Like if you look at a Neumann KH120, it'll have a SPL at X% distortion.
Yeah.
That would genuinely be an interesting metric to have.
But there are.
I would like to do that.
Struggle with that.
Well, I'm just thinking of scenarios where
I think that's a good idea.
Under normal conditions, it would be a pass. But if you EQ'd it, even by 5 dB in the bass, by adding a bass shell, for example, it would be a fail.
Yeah, I think that's why
it would just come out to being a fail.
I don't.
You have to consider. Really. So no, but that's the thing, is under normal conditions, it's a pass.
Yeah.
As soon as somebody starts, tinkering with it, then it's a fail, but that's because they're tinkering with it. Or they're adding...
Listen in chat says, are you going to encounter headphones that fail, though? Not really. Not if you set the standards reasonably.
Well, no, in this case, all those open back focals would be a fail if we're saying that...
Well, how loud do they have to get?
So... I mean, it's 107 dB at 1 kilohertz if you have no bass boost, but it's at 95 dB if you add a bass boost proportionally, depending on how much you add, right?
That would require you to be adding
10
a
dB
12
or whatever, right?
dB.
Something
Yeah,
like that.
12
Yeah. So
dB.
so like it's proportional to how much bass you add, and that's again at 1 kilohertz.
Are you adding 12 dB of bass to the?
I mean, when a
Oh,
lot
no,
of
I'm just
people
saying
are
if
doing the
if
harmon,
somebody's
it might
doing
be a
that,
useful
or
thing to look at.
yeah, or
Yeah, I
or
mean,
if
the
you're running
premise
it out
of
of high output impedance sources, right? That's going to also change the volume threshold for where it clips. Or if you're running it from an X
well,
bass
just because
function,
it's an EQ.
yeah,
Like these are all
effectively.
just
But people
EQ.
don't necessarily know that, right?
So Joel's premise is that you should just have a pass fail based on how its response is, like how its distortion is when it's EQ'd to target. I would probably modify that slightly because there is some range of targets, because there's some range of preference, and just say, we can visualize the distortion of something at a sane maximum level with both the lower and higher levels of preferred bass, because that's
What
going to
is
be the usual thing that
okay?
matters.
I like that. What's the same level that you think?
I mean, I would probably say that it would be. Okay, so this gets us into the problem of measuring things with the correct stimulus. If we were doing this, ideally, we would be measuring this with something that has an RMS level of approximately 80 to 85 dB SPL, which is the upper bound of where people should sit.
Yeah.
And that we should be measuring it with a range of crest factors that represent the actual range of music. And it is possible to generate controllable crest factor multitones. That's not something that we have any current automatic system for.
Right.
But that would probably be more ideal.
Right. Well, I am not of the opinion that harmonic distortion should be hidden. I actually think it should be shown, but I think it could be shown in addition to a pass-fail metric, so that the people who come at that without any sense of it can go, okay, this is a pass or this is a fail. Because again, as has been pointed out, most headphones would be a pass, right?
Also, I really don't think we should be using THD. Like, there's no
No,
point in
definitely
setting
not.
it. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
Also, and this is, I guess, a further stipulation. If you are doing that, you have to have quite wide bandwidth when you measure. Like, you would want to be using 192K and something with a bandwidth out to 100K. Ideally, further, actually, because the harmonics, if you're using a single tone, the harmonics of 20 kilohertz will be very high frequency.
So yeah, and this is a good example from Nitin. Z reviews would say bass. Okay, wait, no, I'm reading. I thought that was referring to something else. So the Eris is a good example of one that would be a fail, because in my instance in particular, because it had like 10% harmonic distortion at like 95 dB for the second harmonic on the left channel, and really, really high order stuff for the right channel. It
is worth noting though that your unit seems like it may have been faulty, because mine didn't have that, and yours had 2 left drivers.
No, it had 2 right baffles.
2 right baffles.
Yeah. So then they were also installed backwards. So that's
yeah.
I'm getting another unit. Yeah, that's
a distortion.
The distortion on my unit wasn't.
I changed. I took it all apart and I.
What was the distortion on yours, Cameron?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but like less than 1%, I think, for normal volumes.
At what level?
No, it wasn't. It was. I remember.
Was it not?
At that for so first of all, yours is not calibrated, right? Like you're using a.
No, it's not calibrated exactly 94. I basically did an inference method using the HD800 as a generator at that level.
I mean, that's reasonable.
I figured this is actually the most accurate tool I have for that. So it's give or take 2 or 3 dB.
Yeah.
But that's close enough.
Yeah. Let me just see if I can find the actual measurement.
Craig Stark in chat says, would a maximum length sequence work for that? How do you know about that, and yet you're wasting your time in our chat?
Wait, do you guys know who Craig is by name?
I don't.
No.
Oh,
I can't find
he is our benefactor at UC.
That would explain it. Well, no, that doesn't explain why he's wasting his time with us, but I'm appreciative.
Nope, so to answer the question, a genuinely good guy who is interested in audio, among plenty of other things.
So to answer the question, an MLS, I actually don't know the crest factor, because like purely random like white noise theoretically has an infinite crest factor because it's a literally random set of values. In practice, time-limited white noise has limited crest factor. And an MLS isn't quite that either because it's bursts of it in sequence. You could technically do the measurement you would have to use MLS for distortion would be something like coherence in a 2-channel FFT. To do that, you could just use real music and take the coherence values. That's something that Steve Tem has done before, and that's something that could be done because the coherence will go to shit when distortion gets high. Or alternatively, what?
You say Steve Tem and not Temmie?
He says Tem.
Oh, then I will take your word for it.
I've met Steve Tem. I mean, we can call him Steve Temmie if you want.
I apologize to Steve Tem.
Maybe it's been a few years, but I'm almost certain that he introduced himself as Steve Tem.
Okay.
Should we move on, guys?
We need to move on. We have to move on,
we do.
guys.
Yes.
Topic number 2. Given non-HRTF related HPTF. Okay, I'm sorry, dude. Like, okay, this is a question that comes from Nuance, and it's so from.
I'll read it if you want.
Yeah. So okay, I'll let you read it. But this is a question that basically, because of what we talk about, how headphones behave differently on different heads, and preferences fall within a range. Is there even a point to data visualization and measurements at all, given how strongly this stuff can vary? I thought this was an interesting question. Now, if you want to give the actual question for the rest of the people here who hate fun,
no, I think that was a fairly
fine. I'll read it.
Go ahead.
Okay. Given non-HRTF related HPTF variation is a factor, and that preferences fall within a range, what's the point of graphs at all? So that is to say, given that there are variations between headphones on heads that are not related to the HRTF differences of those heads.
Yeah.
It's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, one of the important things is that like this variation that we observe generally only happens in part of the response. Like we don't see this variation much below like 1 to 2 kilohertz or so generously. And, there is still stuff of interest in that band below that frequency.
Yeah, quite a lot, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it should be noted, there is HPTF variation in that band. It's just coupling related.
Sorry, which band? I missed what you said there.
Below 1 kilohertz.
Okay, yeah. I like this question. I know you were going to talk about it a bit more.
Please, this is going to be a portion of my CanJam presentation, which is called "These Are the Dark Ages." It is about the problems with current measurements.
That is, for folks unaware, that is on day 1. So if you're going to CanJam, make sure you check out that. We'll be there.
Day 1 at noon, I believe.
It was 10 a.m. Or...
No, it's noon. It's Warren always schedules me before lunch so that when I go over, there's spare time.
Smart. Shout out to Warren.
I love Warren G so much.
Warren's great. Yes, it will be recorded. I will endeavor to be there and recording it.
So,
anyways, so what's our sort of take on just this question as a whole? Is there any sort of there to the concern that like, hey, there's so much variation in this shit regardless? What is the point of even basing our judgments on it? Like, in a sense, this question, I think, points to the analysis of FR, kind of the way that Critical and his sort of following have pushed things in the direction of anyways, which is to say, only evaluate it in terms of really coarse grain, right? Tonality. And all the finer grain stuff that is responsible for our qualitative experiences. We'll just come up with a separate subjective thing for that, right? We'll call it technicalities, but like let's abstract away from that for a moment. Regardless of what's actually responsible for that, we'll put that in a separate kind of mode of analysis.
Well, I'm not sure about that one, but I think that really that what we're talking about here is a question of how precise can our analysis be, and how imprecise can the analysis be before we need to change what we're expecting from it?
Right. So, and I have a thought on this. This is one that maybe Joel and Joel Narrative would disagree with, and I want to also address that because I think that's relevant here. But I think this depends on the acoustic Z of the headphone, because you can kind of come up with a much more confident prediction if the acoustic Z is ultra low, right?
Can you, though?
I mean, in the example that I'm thinking of, the HD800S is extremely similar in comparison to other headphones that perform way more widely. I think it's like if you add those two variables together, then of HPTF variation and preference variation, then it does become a bit of a spider's web.
Well, the thing is,
right?
You shouldn't necessarily sum them, because HPTF variation is presumably a factor in preferential variation.
Yes. I know. That's why it's a ripe for confusion, essentially. Which is why I think this is such a compelling point, right? Like, I think there are people who will disregard the measurements because it doesn't describe their experience, and then they will go, okay, I'm just going to ignore all of it. None of it matters. And then there are people who focus, heavily on it, saying this is the only thing that matters. And the reality is that when you go even further, if you are going down the measurement rabbit hole, you come to this conclusion where you're on the other side of the bell curve, where you go, oh shit, because of HPTF variation being so substantial and preference variation also being a substantial factor in that, you can't actually use this to predict, what somebody's experience is going to be like. And you end up in a similar kind of place. And I think that's where Nuance's point kind of comes from, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So we have a question in chat that I just want to answer before, because there are people who may be left behind on this. What's the difference between HRTF and HPTF?
Please.
So assuming that we have a constant reference point, let's just say the eardrum, an HRTF is the response of a head in a sound field. It could be sound only coming from the front. It could be sound from all directions. It could be the sound of your speakers in your room, whatever. HPTF is same reference point. You have a headphone on, and that's the response you get when putting a voltage into that headphone at your eardrum or at your ear entrance or wherever. So it's the difference between the behavior of your head in a spectrally flat sound field, whatever that sound field is, and the behavior of a headphone on your head.
Yeah,
you could potentially have two people's heads that have the same or almost the same HRTF, i.e., if you measured it out of the eardrum, you'd get the same result. But suddenly with a headphone where things are enclosed and much closer to your ear and small positional variations can have an effect, suddenly the results may not be similar.
Or it could be the inverse. The same headphone could measure the same on two different people who had very different HRTFs, and then it will sound different. So it's a real pain in the ass.
On different rigs, you can calibrate to the same DFH-RTF of like the rig specific DFH
to the same sound field.
Yeah, and you will get a different result. And so the example here is that on the B&K 5128, you typically see more treble energy, and this is the Joel narrative that I like a lot. You typically see more treble energy in the lower to mid treble on the 5128 compared to Gross, and then that flips at around 9 kilohertz, where you see more treble energy on the Gross, and then they kind of trade in the upper frequencies. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but that seems to be a pretty common trend. And so we'd be able to say, well, this head, again, there are also examples where it's like the opposite, right? So you can't say that across the board headphones are going to measure brighter, but certainly for low acoustic Z headphones, that seems to be the case.
So I would actually say that's a fairly compelling answer to Nuance's question, because if, going down the rabbit hole of, thinking measurements are useful, learning more about the limitations of measurements, and then finding them less and less, I guess, useful in how a single measurement will personally relate to you. Once you go deeper and you start to become more familiar with the idiosyncrasies of each head, there is useful data to be mined if you're familiar with the heads and how they typically respond.
You just have to know that. But you also have to know how it is in relation to your head.
Yes.
And I
Which
think
isn't something you can truly know.
Yeah, and
the data is valuable. It's just that there's not really an easy, quick way to get the most out of it straight away. You have to sort of be familiar with how does this headphone measure on that particular rig versus how I hear it. Do that for a few headphones, and you'll pick up on certain things which are consistently different or generally consistently different.
Trends. I mean, consistent
trends.
is hard to say.
Yeah, trends. And you can use that when you look at future measurements to go, well, okay, well, I know that there's usually a bit of a trend for a difference in this particular area, so I'll probably hear a slight difference there. But otherwise, you can still use the coarse-grained information and some of the more fine-grained information that has proven to be more trending towards consistency in the past. It's a problem of interpretation and variation between listeners, not that the data itself is not useful.
I would say two things on this. I just want to mention the reasons why that might be the case, or maybe we can expand on this. But different head shapes, different physical ear shapes, different air volume for the ear canal. These are all potential variables.
Well, the air volume should matter less than the terminating impedance of the drum. So the structure of the bones of the middle ear.
Yeah, I'm thinking of more for IEMs.
Oh yeah, you're thinking about length
or like higher. Yeah, exactly. But in general, it's the physical factors of a human head that are variable, and these are going to contribute to these the difference in behavior for headphones on different heads. The other thing I was going to say is, in many ways, and let me know if you guys disagree with this, because I'm not committed to this idea, but like in many ways, given the current state of data visualization and understanding of measurements and the way that people publish them, including us, I think if anything, it just means that we need to soften some of our conclusions based on that data. It's not conclusions, soften some of our judgments based on that data as it would relate to other people's experiences, and focus them more on as they would relate to the experiences of those particular heads. So the Gross system or the 5-2-8. And then, because you can then take that and put it on an actual human head, and you could say, well, this behavior might be a bit different. So relating them. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh, okay.
Well, I was just going to say relating the different hats fixtures as different heads, I think is the first step towards increasing the understanding there. But to try and extrapolate, this is the performance on this head, therefore it's going to predict the performance on your head is where I think we need to soften that connection.
I mean, I think that there's a simple way to conceptualize this. Like, if you are ordering like cut lumber and the dimensional tolerance of the cutting is 1 inch, it makes no sense to specify in increments of 0.1 inch. Like we're in a situation where people are reading into these graphs down to a level of pixels, and that's just wrong. Like that's not going to be predictive at all of their experience.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we should visually be representing. I've suggested the idea of having the lines literally be wider so that people can't pixel peep.
Yes. So I think I agree with that sentiment when it comes to data visualization. When it comes to like personal reviews where we're honestly recounting our experience, I mean, I think there's merit to qualifying that this is specific to you and yada yada. But I don't think, I guess, the knowledge of how something will vary in the treble should really affect your judgment of your enjoyment of the product.
I'm not thinking of it like that. I'm thinking of situations where, absent or independent of a review, like you're not actually consuming any content on this.
Okay, yeah, so just for data viz, basically.
Yeah. Because that's really where, like, I mean, we say this all the time, but really the problem is with the audio file, right? Or the
always,
like, you know what I mean, right? Like, it's always the fault is between.
You can mean whatever you want. That statement is an iron
But in
law.
this instance, I mean, the fault is in many cases it's with the graph reader. But like, the visualizations as they are right now, maybe Blaine can talk about how this can be improved. But
well, I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
There's the question of what we are trying to achieve. And I do think that is something that underpins Nuance's question, and that's something that comes up a fair bit. Is the goal of these charts to be a guide for EQ? Is the goal of these charts to guide, like, purchase decisions when you're not going to be equalizing? Like, what are you trying to get out of these things? Are you trying to say this is what I need to adjust to get perfect Harman compliance? Well, then yes, graphs are, if not useless, not very good, unless you have one of a fairly limited number of headphones actually used for the Harman work.
Or you have,
but if what you're
or you have Todd Welty sitting next to you, and you can just
yeah.
Everybody should have a pocket Todd Welty.
I wouldn't mind.
Yeah.
So I personally think that we should sort of we need to have new visualizations for different applications. I think that it's useful for people to know this is how variable a headphone is on one head moved around. I think it's useful for people to know this is how a headphone varies when you have glasses or something else that causes leaks. Yeah. I think it's useful for people to know this is how this headphone varies between different heads. And all of those measures aren't necessarily something that will be useful for questions like, what is an EQ that will generally improve the sound of this headphone? Which is still something that you can say, right? It's not going to involve Q20, 1 decibel changes, because that's insanity, which is something that a lot of people don't understand right now, and we really need to keep hammering on because of that. But there are broad trends and broad differences that will, yield consistent improvements when you fix them, right? And I think that we just need to bring measurements to people for headphones in much more of the way we have with speakers. Like with speakers, we have a much better guideline, even if it's not terribly well represented in CEA 2034, for you can't EQ this problem or you can EQ this problem with their directivity.
Here's a question.
That's something.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, from Pants Tucked In again, how can the acoustic Z of a headphone be measured?
Yeah, that's a problem.
Yeah.
At low frequencies, it's not super hard. You can just use the substitution method and look at the transfer level between a coupled and an uncoupled situation. As the frequency rises, that does not work so well. And we get into the pain train.
Yeah.
This is actually a topic of my presentation.
But that's why it's important to qualify. Like when we say things like the HD800 is an extremely low acoustic impedance headphone, or a comparative judgment of that versus another open headphone. Like, yes, I think there's an extent to which we can make an inference based on our perception of the openness. But do we really know? And do we really know?
Well, we do know that up to mid frequencies, at least, the
I think it's like 800 hertz.
Impedance. Yeah, because that was where the impedance tube measurements they use, which is the other way, using the reciprocity method. So there's a few ways to do it, but for high frequencies, we are conjecturing at best.
And like I might be able to find a result between two different heads for the HD800 that shows that they're fairly close for their behavior. At the same time, that's just two heads for starters. That's not, I haven't
maybe
done
different operators and different positioning and different pads.
Yeah, well, in this case, it was just me doing all of it, right? It was the same pads, literally the same pad. So I controlled for that, and it was also the HD800S, which is like a pretty, well, at least for Anyways, same operator, right? But if you look at the data that Joel likes to bring up for the DT990 across different humans. And the DT990 is a semi-open headphone, open-ish. It's not
say open-ish.
Open-ish, yeah, but it's not as low.
Well damped, but it's open.
Yeah, it's not as low as the HD800, but that's a scenario where it's not an unreasonable style of headphone to consider, and the variation was extreme, right? So like,
I just think it's important to be. Just like because the Kunz tube method that like Grell cited in his presentation like was only up to 800 hertz, and when we're talking about the effects of non-HRTF HBTF variation, like they're basically all above that we're pointing to.
We really need a different word for that, by the way.
Yes
we do.
By the way, Side Solid says, I do like how Oratory shows some measurements with ranges of variation rather than a single line. This is something that we plan to incorporate.
Common Oratory
we're working on it.
Yep. Yeah. There's the questions of what variation should be graphed and how you can, because we have multiple mechanisms of variation and multiple, like how we graph it all together properly. And that does apply back to Nuance's question. There is a reasonable contention that this implies that our understanding of headphones is a lot more limited than people tend to think. And that's
by the way, I should just note that like I believe it's from Nuance. I could be totally
No,
wrong.
Pretty sure.
I believe it's from Nuance. Okay. Shout outs to Nuance, by the way. Good questions.
Good guy.
To your point, Blaine, about how things can vary.
Cameron, did you internally Cameron, did you intentionally turn off your camera?
It's probably changing. He's probably changing the battery. He does this
from
time to time. There we go. He's back. It's not like you when you had to go do your prime minister duties. I saw that in the chat. Bustin' Trudeau over here. No, Blaine, I was going to say you just brought up about like how there are different ways in which the behavior can vary. You could have headphones that are both well coupled, show variation, and then you could also have headphones where the coupling itself is what's responsible for, leakage effects and things like that.
Yeah, the question is, how much do you want to hold constant for one plot to make it usable to understand what this mechanism is contributing? Like the ideal would probably be having a graph builder of sorts that let you add different things together. But that's not necessarily something that you can support because all the variables in play would mean you need a lot of data to do that.
It would be an enormous task to measure one headphone.
Yeah. And I mean, really, it probably should be harder to measure a headphone than it is. Like right now, I mean, like...
Depends how much you're measuring, but like it takes... Depends on the headphone too. Like oh my God, man. Like imagine doing this for like ANC headphones or like the ones that I'm... Oh my God. I'm currently measuring the AirPods Pro 2 and to compare with the Galaxy Buds, and the amount of shit that you have to do to prime and to spoof the device into performing the way that it would on a human is absurd.
What kind of stuff do you actually have to do to it, out of curiosity? I'd heard of stories of people like putting a little bit of ham in the...
That's what I did.
Did you actually?
He went to the store, got ham,
and it works.
He's using that
because it doesn't. It's absurd. Like you try and put tape over it, doesn't work. I tried to use leather, doesn't work. It needs some sort of like fleshy. It's a flesh sensor.
Cheese works, flesh. I believe.
Oh yeah, Sam. When Sam and I were testing this originally, we used cheese, and that did work.
I would rather have cheese residue on that head than
no.
Residue.
Why is the 5128 moldy? Well,
my solution was I have these little alcohol wipes, so I put that in first, and then I put the ham on top of the alcohol wipe, so it wouldn't come into contact with the ear. Makes sense.
And that works.
It works. Yeah, I have a picture of it.
I would say you might want to try with just the ham, actually.
No. I promise you it works because you can put the other one in your ear, and when you prime it, you can hear that the ANC turns on.
Okay.
Or when you spoof it, right? The problem though is that I ran into a situation where I think my AirPods Pro 2 might be defective.
That makes two of them.
It does, yeah.
Because I don't know what the hell's going on with that Galaxy.
It's so bizarre. But... So yes, headphone testing should take a long time, and it does take a long time, increasingly more. But there are some devices where it is hell. I mean, the Galaxy Buds. I find
passive headphones to be fine for the most part.
Passive headphones are totally fine. Passive headphones is like it's a dream, right? Where things just sort of work normally.
Comparatively.
But with all these like human sensing and ANC and wireless. Oh, here's another one. Anything that requires a particular source device, like a phone, in this case, I mean, I'm not sure if the response is different between an iPhone or something else for the Apple ones, but I wanted to use a phone for the Galaxy ones, just because, right? Tested in ideal conditions. And guess what? Rue is still bugged where you can't sweep from file for the left channel only. You can do it for the right channel, no problem, but it's bugged for the left channel.
I've been doing it for the left channel only.
With a timing
from a file?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you sure that you don't have the timing reference pickup for the wrong channel?
I'm sure because it works like 1 out of every 10 times. So
lovely.
And I've tried to troubleshoot this many times.
Have you updated your Rue install?
There's probably a new one now, but I remember troubleshooting this like a while ago, and it was just hell. So, anyways, this is neither here nor there.
Gollum in chat says, I like Oratory's approach of what is the likely variation of any copy of this headphone. That's fantastic. It's also quite expensive if you want to do it as an independent reviewer.
We have
it's something that as a store, we should probably be doing more with our open box stuff.
We have done this with the HD 600 and 650. So we have many different units of those.
With a very small sample size. So where Oratory has us beat is in sample size, but where we have him beat is that his includes all sorts of different conditions of pad. So we controlled for the pads. We have the same pads for all the... Well, we have one... That's one of the things. We also have the other pads measured too. Yeah, and ideally, as a store, the fresh pad one would be.
I would say the fresh pad.
You want both sets of data, but you don't really want them leaking into each other as like the canonical measurement of that headphone.
Even that though, like as the person who does the measurements, I notice things like the pads wear in asymmetrically on the HD6 series. So if you have the person who wore the headphones to wear them in is influencing the result of the frequency response, because it's different depending on the orientation of the pad after it's worn in. It's so frustrating.
Now if only that baked in some HRTF stuff too.
Yeah.
Anyway. Joel is asking me to explain pressure division ratio. Very, very quickly, it is just the effect of the ear load on the response of the headphone measured by comparing an open ear measurement and a closed ear measurement. That would be fairly asinine for us to implement. It is doable, and it's something we may do, but I don't actually think that it's necessarily explanatory enough to be a major priority.
Okay. So the outcome of this question here from Nuance is wait for Blaine's presentation at CanJam, where he will reveal that we are in the Dark Ages and that there is a path forward. Or is it that we're just in the Dark Ages?
There's going to be a little bit of solution, but it's mostly going to be, this is why... Well, it's going to be, this is what I see as the problems of this community and this industry's interaction with data. Like, we have a lot of people who are outright rejecting it for stupid reasons, and we have a lot of people who are using it in stupid ways, and those two things feed back into each other in a cycle of idiocy.
This is the best. I love this. This is the most apt description.
I've heard the first version of the talk, the first draft. It's exactly what you think it is, but it's excellent.
Good. We need this, so we will film it and we will bring it to you guys. All right, that's the solution. Nuance. Wait for Blaine's presentation. Let's move on to some
we got some news.
Some news and some.
I don't think we have any recent impressions this time. Do we? No. Have you heard anything new, Cameron? Have you heard anything new?
No.
Just the
one thing which will be at SoCal but can't talk about yet.
Cannot talk.
Oh, wait, yes. Did they finish it?
Yes. I've seen this.
Oh, sick! And it worked.
I'll talk to you offline.
Okay, thanks.
It looks glorious. I'm excited.
Anxious about that.
Shh. Okay, so no recent impressions, but there were definitely some pieces of news that we should talk about. The first and most obvious probably being the Apple stuff.
So I don't follow Apple stuff. It's
okay. Then I can update you.
Yes, please. So it's a new AirPods. Yeah.
So they've introduced a new version of the AirPods 4, which are the open air earbuds that do not seal, and so not AirPods Pro. But this new version does have ANC, so it's open but has ANC, which I think is interesting because I was always but I was also like passing interest in the Samsung Galaxy Buds Live, which I never actually got a chance to
use. The beans.
Oh god, I have a pair of those. They're so bad. I hate them.
I'm sure they are.
The ANC is
Blaine likes them.
They are just garbage. There's nothing redeeming about them except for that they look kind of funny.
I like not having my ears occluded.
I mean, is there a chance, Cameron, I don't know if there are QC issues, but certainly the Sam's Galaxy Buds that he sent me to check out do not measure remotely like they should. They are the worst sounding things in the world.
I will
So
say
It could be,
the
I don't know, a
measurement-
sample size of 1.
Yeah.
The one that
the
I have
measurements I've seen of the
sounds like it
Samsung Galaxy
measures.
Buds Live looked pretty decent and had more bass than you would think from
So
this
that's
kind
what I
of
mean,
form
right?
factor.
Like,
Oh,
could
no,
be.
they had bass. It's just that I don't know. It was like really kind of mid-bassy and congested and they sounded like really, really cheap headphones. It sounded like they'd completely given up actual sound quality overall, even though the overall tonality wasn't like broken or anything. It's just, going to purely subjective terms, the technicalities were non-existent is the best way of putting it. It sounds like they went, we need to make this bean shaped. I don't care how you do it. I don't care what goes wrong. Just make it bean shaped. And that was the priority. So
I mean, really, the main thing is they're completely irrelevant now that we have completely non-coupling earphones. Like that is the future for that kind of design. Yeah, like the earrings.
Now the thing is, what you're talking about does not have any sort of noise cancellation, though. So there is still maybe.
Well, no, I mean there is one actually. There's one
that sits outside the ear.
Yeah,
and cancels.
Yeah, there's Sony has a patent on that actually, but it's for over ears.
Is it? Can they make one that's brain canceling?
God, I
wish. Reality canceling.
But when I saw the announcement for this, like I wasn't really surprised, but I was surprised by how many people I think actually would use them in my personal life. So, like for example, my little brother is a chef, and he's. What's up?
No, go ahead. Sorry, you're good.
My little brother's a chef, and he works in loud kitchens, and like needs something to, both isolate him a little bit from the sound of everything, but also be able to hear when people are talking to him. And apparently that's something that Apple's working on, where like there's some sort of feature wherein if a specific person talks to you, the ANC will adapt and like let them through, which I think is really interesting. And for
wear modes are improving as time goes by.
Yeah, like there was even the old ones were supposedly trying to do something like that, right?
Right, but doing this all while not actually occluding the ear canal nearly as much as something with the silicone tip would do is also compelling to me. And my partner is a.
I was appreciating that as well. I love Rob.
Classic Rob Hawk. Yeah. But my partner is also a tattoo artist, and she's also like very petite. So like something like this like just does not work for her at all. Like she's very small ears, but the AirPods form factor has literally always worked for her. So I will probably be buying these day one, because the one thing she doesn't like about them is they don't have ANC.
Do you have any?
So
tattoos?
even I don't actually. I'm fully clean. Yeah. I don't really have a reason for not, but no, just never came to mind. But then past that, the AirPods Pro. Sorry?
Would it be audio or music related if you did?
No. Okay. Honestly, when it comes to tattoos, I kind of don't really care too much about it having meaning or significance. It would just be something that's like cool art.
Tattoo of Sean Olive,
but
says Joel.
No. But then AirPods Pro 2, the one with the silicone tip, got approved by the FDA as a hearing aid, which fairly interesting stuff. I mean, I don't know if my characterization of this is completely correct, but I would assume the stigma around hearing aids is palpable. And
there's two problems with hearing aids. Speaking as someone who grew up around a lot of old people, one is that hearing aids have a lot of user problems. Like behind the ear hearing aids have regular problems with feedback, just from things getting close, and then you get an acoustic feedback loop with their amplification because they use an open canal. Occluding hearing aids, old people don't put them in correctly, and nobody wants to say that they're old and deaf, so people don't like to actually even get assessed of whether they need hearing aids. And once they have them, the problems they encounter with them make them not want to use them. It's a fucking pain in the ass to get people to use them.
I would add price to that list as well.
Oh yeah.
So
this is for people with insurance, but yeah.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting that at the on sale at least $200 price point, Andrew, what are you doing?
I'm trying to get it just something that doesn't suck. Just continue.
Okay. I think at that price point, in that form factor, with the rest of the features, and with a look that is not at all related to what people think of as a hearing aid, I think there's potential for a lot of younger people who do need hearing aids but would not get them because of the stigma I'm mentioning, and because of the price.
Stigma balls.
And maybe not having insurance. What I just think there's a legitimately good side to this being an offering that the AirPods Pro 2 will have. And I'd be interested to see how in the future, because I know they have some sort of like audiogram integration where you can like input a measured hearing curve done by an audiologist and like use that to kind of like backdoor EQ your AirPods Pro 2. I've never tried it or anything, and I know the people who have tried it have had mixed results. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that this is a thing that currently exists, and it's like also like a good headphone with like good features.
This is also why Sonoma bought Sennheiser or Sonova or whatever.
Yes, yeah, I would 100% believe that.
There is a Sennheiser hearing aid as a result. Like there's an IEM that has an FDA certification, so it's basically the future of hearing aids. Sorry, go ahead, Cameron.
I was gonna say there's new AirPods Max as well, isn't there? Although it seems like they're not actually different, really.
They're just different.
All they did was add USB-C and a few new colors. And I do want to talk about that with you guys, because to me, that is actually good news rather than bad news.
Yeah, because you secretly like the AirPods Max.
Well,
no, I don't think that's a secret.
Do they not have upper treble? Or?
They have a ton. Response.
I don't really like them, but they have a consistent in situ response. But Apple has in their patents identified many of the and come up with solutions for, but they're not on products yet, a lot of the problems inherent to closed back headphones. Like they actually have solutions that have not been implemented for a lot of things. And the fact that they've not released a product with that yet does not mean they're not working on it. I would expect the AirPods Max 2, when it does come out, to look different and work different. Like I think we're going to probably see an entirely different headband and collapsing scheme. We're probably going to see a different like padding and suspension, as well as like cup articulation.
So we won't have the bra anymore.
We won't. I would be very surprised if we had the bra.
The bra was not well received.
I don't quite understand how that ever happened in the first place, to be honest.
That sentiment extends to most of that headphone for me, honestly. But it does a few of the things well, and they're the things that most closebacks don't do well, which is in situ consistency.
I think the thing with the bra is that Apple fairly regularly throws dice on, we can change how people will define their look. Like they're like, oh, you know, people are going to start carrying around smartphones. People are going to start carrying around iPods. People are going to start wearing the original earpods where they had the fucking dancing advertisements with the single color figures and the white cables, and the white cables stood out initially. So they're like, people like to be visibly Apple in a lot of cases. Maybe this is another one of those things, and they did not land at all.
It's like Kyle Hertzman's video where he was jumping around wearing them.
I love that video.
I'm aware of a series. Yeah, actually, that does sound familiar. Yeah. Although when you say that, it reminds me of him wearing the Koss ESP 950, and I get traumatic memories.
Man, I don't know if I still have that video saved. I did have that video saved on my hard drive.
You know the one I'm talking about. Yeah,
I do. Yeah. I tried at one point to make it into a transparent sticker on Discord, where he just like, because he like kind of dances into frame and then out of frame.
Yeah.
Ironically, that's something more generative AI is probably useful.
Perhaps.
Oh God.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know if there's much more to say about the AirPod. Oh, go ahead, Cameron.
Oh no, sorry, I was going to move us on.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Genelec.
I mean, like, are you guys excited for it? Are you gonna like just in general? Like, is this something that
I'm excited to
there's
try
always
the
that-
AirPods Pro 4 with ANC.
Okay. Yeah. But I mean, this is always something where it's like if Apple actually does something good in this space, there it could be amazing, right? Like, there's always that.
Yeah, like
thing that
I
Apple
would
does.
I would assume the AirPods, not Pro, the AirPods 4 ANC are going to
Is good.
be like a better version of the Beans in basically every way.
Right.
Like I would assume ergonomically that shape is like more cromulent for people.
I just think if they took
I would
the idea around the AirPods Pro 2 and applied that to like an over-ear headphone with good ergonomics,
I think that is the plan.
that would be very nice.
Yeah,
Still,
and
I still
I
wouldn't
would say
be-
there's even room for improvement in that regard. But
Oh yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I mean that's
Of course.
still a great.
The
still a great
treble's
problem.
not
But yeah,
ideal, right? So yeah.
yeah, I think we can move on now.
Now for the announcement we're excited about.
Genelec
Yeah.
is making a headphone or has made a headphone.
Yes, they
is
are.
releasing it, and a system like a I don't know what to call it.
So that system
Console
already exists,
thing.
as far as I'm aware. It's their
Yeah.
9320A monitor controller, which is, I think, meant to be used with their SAM system, which is exclusive to the 1 series monitors, and then I think one of the 0 series monitors.
What are your guys'
I thought
expectations?
that it was isn't it the ones? It's everything with a 3 prefix, right? So it's the ones, but it's
Yes.
also the 8331, the 8340. Not the sorry, the 83. Fuck was it? So like they have a SAM
Yes.
series of non-coaxials.
Yes,
Sorry,
the 83XX series.
Yeah.
Have that. Yeah.
So
Sorry, you were gonna say.
what are your guys' expectations of the Genelec headphone?
Well, we should probably go through some of the main features of it first. One of
Yeah.
which is that it comes with calibration
show
files
you its
for the
features.
headphones. Yeah, if you can bring those up, actually.
Yeah.
So having a calibration
Do we have a
file,
list, or are you just looking at the website?
Oh, I'm just looking at the article at the moment. I didn't know if there was a list or not. Maybe there's not. But having a calibration file, basically meaning that unit variation in and of itself should not really be a thing. Well, should be corrected for more accurately.
Right.
That alone is pretty interesting because I think a lot of people vastly underestimate how significant unit variation can be on many headphones, including particularly high-end ones.
Well, and also like the
Except for this one.
Yeah.
Blaine is so excited.
They are closed back, which is interesting.
So this
Yeah.
They have to be for studio
Yeah.
use.
Yeah.
and this is like
So
meant to
am
be
I the
used-
only one that thinks they kind of don't have to be? Because like at this kind of price range they're playing at, and like the fact that they're shooting for like integration with someone's existing Genelec setup, I feel like those are mostly people who are working in control rooms, which are separated from the actual music room and isolated from it. So like, well, yes, like traditionally, like a closed back is like a more studio ready headphone because you can take it into the tracking room. I'm not necessarily sure that like they needed it to be closed for this, which is
Well,
kind of
the
why
thing
I
is,
was a
if-
bit disappointed that it was closed.
If you have $2,400 for the PRM system and you have a room that is quiet, why wouldn't you just have speakers? Like, why wouldn't you just have some 8320s or whatever, 8330s?
Well, because if you need to do, if you're like a professional who's been all around the world and works on a bunch of different projects, like someone who would have like a big Genelec setup and have the money to afford that,
It's
you
just
might
the
be
ersatz-
in a hotel
ersatz.
room one night
Yeah.
and like need to get a mix done and have the familiarity
This
of your
was the
monitors in
reasoning
your head.
behind
But
Head Audio Headphone 1. That's what they were thinking of marketing that towards, was people who
well,
would
yeah, I mean
be-
the MM series of Odyssey's headphones are the same
Yeah,
thing, where
as
it's
well.
like, if
Yeah.
you're in a hotel room or if you're in an unfamiliar environment of any sort, you still have a consistent reference with you. But again, these aren't spaces that need a closed headphone either.
They don't necessarily need it, but I'm not sure that the market for people who are doing pro work with headphones is really that slanted towards people who would be okay with an open headphone. Like, I think
What do
that's
you guys-
probably more of a minority, if anything.
Are you
It's a good
showing it
point.
on
They might
screen?
see it being open as a downside and just ignore it. Sorry, what were we saying, Andrew?
Yep.
Are you showing it on the stream right now, Griffin?
No, I'm not.
Also,
I
common
got it.
Capra L in chat.
Might want to just pop it up there so people can see what it looks like.
Yeah, I
So
gotta
it's also
drag it to the front.
got some extra DSP features, including slope adjustment, parametric EQ, left-right level balancing. And this is the kind of interesting one. The optional Aural ID V2.0 is then capable of modeling the user's own head and upper torso features to calculate their unique personal HRTF.
I'm always
Process
so
which the
skeptical
company...
of that.
Well,
So
Aural
this is-
ID
well,
actually
okay.
works pretty well. The 1.0 version works pretty well.
I have kind of two big things about this. One is what kind of response are they actually going to go for on the headphones themselves? Because Genelec is a company you would sort of trust to not screw things up. But as we kind of discussed earlier on in the stream, there's also various ways to do things right. And if there is an HRTF correction procedure, then what kind of result factoring in the HRTF are they going for? And also, how well is that HRTF effect going to work? Especially once you consider the HPTF effects, because it's a closed back head.
So, so that is a big thing. I have heard from someone who was at an audio show recently. Oh wait, hold on. I just realized I should do that. That they have 3 modes for HRTF virtualization. So to be clear, the HRTF stuff is not like just for not passively, but like just for listening to a stereo mix. Like it is meant to be used for virtualization of like object-based audio. And the 3 modes they have are based on the Kemar mannequin. So I assume they have a full host of free field HRTFs around a Kemar mannequin and are using that. The second is with the Neumann KU100, which was an interesting choice to me, but it's very popular.
For pro audio,
it's popular.
Yeah. And then the third is the Aural ID preset. So again, I'm not sure how much it's going to factor into the tone of the headphone when used for stereo music. I think what it's more going to be used for is that kind of accuracy of virtualization, which is similar to what Apple is doing with their kind of picture. In this case, Aural ID is a video, but they're like ear scan applied to the spatial audio.
And this does have head tracking as well. Well, webcam-based head tracking support.
Yeah,
it's a shame that it's not built into the headphones.
It would have been nice to see just an It's a very expensive device. It would have been nice to see an accelerometer in there, but at the same time, then you would probably have to have additional cables or wireless transmission stuff. So perhaps that's not actually as simple as it may seem.
Now, the most important thing here, guys, what do you guys think of the look?
I like it.
I didn't like it at first, but it really grew on me once I noticed that the cups are shaped like the Genelec.
Huh?
Yeah, they are. They have a very. It's like keeping with their brand design language.
I like it a lot. It's the perfect design language for me.
The material. It looks like they're actual like sort of sandblasted metal cups as well.
Yeah.
Which, if that is the case, that's really nice. So I think that it's going to look better in person than it does in the photos.
My suspicion is that this is built similarly to the usual Genelec stuff, which probably means that most of the contact surfaces will be aluminum which I believe they like cast in Ilsami, and they're probably just treating and painting it there, which is also probably why it's fairly expensive. But
yeah,
I'm quite excited for this one. I feel like we kind of need to see how they've tuned them. In fact, that's the one thing which is really uncertain. It sounds like from previous experiences and stuff, the HRTF stuff is probably going to work quite well. And the Genelec is kind of a company which you would probably trust to not put something like this out unless they were confident that it was actually going to work properly. But I'm just very curious to see how they've tuned it, and particularly how well the HRTF compensation stuff works, given as this is a closed back headphone, which means that the HPTF effects are probably going to be more significant.
To cite Joel, HPTF variation effects.
So the one thing I will say is I am not confident this is going to be a good sounding headphone without DSP.
Yes,
because designing a good headphone for DSP is not necessarily congruent with getting the best possible tuning.
This is what Final Audio did with their ZE8000 thing, where they basically just made it completely flat and then did the whole ear scanning thing, then supplied in the app the personalization thing, and it's now an HRTF shape. I don't know that it's correct. It's reasonable. It's not far off, but it's that was their method of doing it, which seems more reasonable than trying to aim for a something that is like somebody else's HRTF and then adjusting from there.
It's also for in-ears acoustic flat is very easy. For this one, it probably is not going to be that,
right?
Because it's an over-ear. Wait, what the fuck? Hobby Talk is watching us on a plasma TV, so he appreciates when we change the screen. Why are you watching this on a plasma TV? But yeah, like he wants the visual change so it doesn't burn in his plasma TV. Why does he have a plasma TV in 2024? I mean,
shout outs to Hobby Talk.
It's fine. Shout out to Hobby Talk. But yeah, I mean, I think we're all excited for this. I do think, we should probably be tempering our expectations of the stock sound profile when used passively. And it can be used passively. It is meant to be used with the monitor controller, but it's just a 6.35 millimeter TRS jack. You can plug it into anything. I would be very surprised if it sounded good. Because it's not 4.4.
Well, no. I think that they should have made it proprietary so that they could implement things like an accelerometer on it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I think it would be a better product if they had used a proprietary connection, because the whole point of it is to be used with
It'll be interesting to see how viable this is
model thing
standalone, like as its own thing, running passively on a normal amp or whatever, versus through the monocontroller with a calibration. Like, how significant is the calibration going to be?
If it sounds good on its own, it would be fantastic. I would be sort of surprised.
What I'm wondering is the calibration file mostly just correcting for unit variation properties, or is it correcting for unit variation properties and also quite heavily adjusting the actual response of the headphone, because what it does passively is not what they wanted it to do with the complete system or whatever? Like, I'm curious how well it's going to work without that monitor controller.
It looks like it does the Rode thing, where it has jacks on both cups.
Does it actually? Oh, please don't do that.
Rode things have the thing where you can do, it's a single entry cable, but you can do it on either side. It's kind of curious, and I'm not entirely sure of why people want that. But
interesting.
At first, I thought it was dual entry, but
it's not. But sometimes the desk setup just your audio interface is on the left side, or your headphone jack on your laptop is on the right side, and it can just be less intrusive to pick a side.
All right, I care so much about this. Let's move on, and let's actually have a palette cleanser here. Should we do the Subjectivist challenge?
Sure.
All right. People who know us, or don't for that matter, send us suggestions for headphones to describe subjectively in DMs.
Looking at you, either Hobby Talk or Capra or Mr. Super, if you're still here.
Yeah, someone hit me up.
And Mr. Super might have.
Someone hit me with a banger of a suggestion.
I think we drove away Mr. Super with the long digression on HRTF and PRTF.
Right? Okay. Okay, I have one. It's an over-ear headphone. This is a headphone that... so for anybody who isn't aware, the Subjectivist challenge is that us, people who hate fun, have to describe a headphone in purely subjective language. So we're not able to talk about frequency response or anything to do with objective language whatsoever. I think extension is probably even something like that, right, is a bit much. So we have to use the qualia vernacular, the audiophile vernacular. So the headphone I'm thinking of is an over-ear headphone. It is a headphone that a lot of people were excited for when it came out, because it is from a brand that wouldn't have traditionally been in this headphone market. It is a headphone that I would describe as...
TNA.
Nope. Good guess. I would describe it as slightly warm poo. Well, actually, I would say it's somewhat It's on the warm poo side of neutral. but you can modify it fairly easily to make it a bit brighter, to be a bit more
it's NTH
crisp.
100.
I saw William picked it up. So
go ahead.
So this one also actually very, very similar backstory. Over a headphone came from a brand that people were not expecting to release headphones, or at least headphones in that price category at all. And when it came out, there was quite a lot of hype around it and its bigger brother. So it's a bit of an odd headphone because you might, when it came out, there was this phrase that we used, dark bright, to refer to things that really had that sort of, wow, yeah.
Yeah, I was trying to put together with the bigger brother, but yeah, I forgot that Alear and Utopia came out at the same time.
As soon as you said dark bright, I'm like, I know exactly what it is. And you're right. It was a brand that didn't traditionally make headphones. Well, they had like some stuff that they didn't make, right? That was in their brand, but you know,
and
they
they had like the Spirit series, and they were
which is
received terribly because of
and the folk called Sphere.
It didn't use.
I had a pair of those.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one.
Okay.
So this is a headphone that the more I listened to it, the more I found myself enjoying it and forgiving whatever flaws it had, because the presentation was a very kind of relaxed, slightly distanced, spacious presentation with a comfort to match, really. I would say, never heard it. I would say
the satyr.
No, I would say the big draw for this headphone probably is to do with that kind of sense of spaciousness, because I wouldn't really say it's, on the dynamic side. It's kind of a softer, but not necessarily muffled listen.
Tell me about the detail.
I would say the detail at its price range is right about where you would expect. It's not, breaking any norms, but it's definitely not, terrible or anything like that.
HE400 SE.
No.
I wouldn't call that.
Sorry, did you say it's on the warmer side, or?
I would say versus the rest of the headphone market, it is
Audio-Technica R70X.
Slightly V-shaped?
I would say it's slightly V-shaped. However, there is another tuning option for this headphone, which is decidedly more neutral.
It's the 490.
Yeah, it is.
I was gonna be my guess, actually, because you said soundstagey, right? So,
but nothing else impressive.
So this, I'd say, for the money, is an extremely detailed sounding headphone. Very spacious, kind of a focus on soundstage. It's a little bit on the sort of bass light side, but at the same time tight and controlled, with excellent separation of vocals and instruments.
Aria.
Yeah, there you go.
So easy.
Quick.
All right, I got one. I don't think I've done this one before. So this is a headphone that it's an over-ear headphone. Picking it up, the first impression for me was not very positive. It really doesn't quite feel like it's worth its price class, to be entirely honest. The general timbre of the sound isn't too wrong, but there's just something I find kind of annoying about the treble, and the bass has much less impact than I would expect.
Is it?
It's no, it is not a ZMF. It's a light headphone, which I can say positively, and it takes a lot of design cues from a fairly well-designed headphone, so that's positive, I suppose. But it's really just not quite for me. One of the strongest
microplankton.
I find it to be not a very detailed headphone.
You find it to not be a very detailed headphone. Okay.
Yeah. It's also one of the very few open headphones that has given me this claustrophobic effect when I've listened to it.
HD650.
HD 560S.
Nope, you're all completely off.
DCA Eon Open. Eon Open.
Nope.
Okay.
No, I wouldn't say this has the sort of the fullness of the Eon Open. That's definitely a warmer character.
Yeah.
This definitely doesn't have an excess of the male vocal fundamentals.
Is it a Hi-Fi-Man headphone? Oh, an excess of the male fundamentals.
It does not.
Does not have an
It
excess.
does not. Oh, okay. Now
There are too many Hi-Fi-Man headphones to let you disqualify them all in one go.
Okay, HE400 SE.
No, it is not the 400 SE.
Is it
People
the
are so
Safar
far off.
unveiled?
No,
I heard it.
I think I heard it for like 2 seconds.
Well, wait. No, because we didn't have one there when you.
Hold on, my cat's meowing.
No, because I was up the last time. I've been up there twice while you've
but
had
that
it.
was right, but that was not the functioning one. That was the. That's right. You did hear it. I. That's right. I misremembered.
Okay, so chat is closer to the price range. You guys are really undershooting on the except for the Susvara. You guys are undershooting. No, it is not.
We're undershooting. Sorry,
Is it the Yamaha?
It is not the Yamaha. It is not the HE6.
Wow, Blake's got us stumped here.
So this is something that we. So I heard this first at CanJam. This is not a headphone that anyone I know has ever bought, and it's a headphone that I hope no one I know will ever buy. Okay, it's not that bad.
It's not the
I very much disliked it, particularly in relation to its price. And frankly, I felt that in every respect, sound quality, build quality, ergonomics, it was completely inappropriately
non-Eggy Man
priced.
ones do they have that aren't as far priced?
It's not it's not a Hi-Fi-Man. It's not a Hi-Fi-Man.
Oh, okay. Sorry, right.
So is it a Warwick Acoustics headphone?
Yes.
Is it the Bravura? Yeah.
Well, I was actually thinking of the earlier one.
Oh, the Sonoma.
Yeah, but I mean, those criticisms apply to all of them. They're really. I cannot get over how much occlusion effect I feel the moment I put them on.
So I think
it's
I know why
worse than any closed headphone I've ever had.
I think I know why. It's because the clamp on those is pretty intense, and I feel like it's probably pressing on like the bone structure around your ears, because it does that for me as well.
Bone pressure is a negative sound stage.
They do say that
the Sim channel says Cameron likes them, doesn't he? And I believe Cameron does like them. And that's one where we're very diametric.
The sound quality I like as well for the Bravura. It's basically Harman.
The main issue with the Bravura for me was that you can't turn it up very loud. Like it has a bit of a heavy SPL limit.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's that honestly the lower mids and bass sound hollow to me for some reason in a way that I don't usually associate with Harman stuff. Admittedly, I might have had some leak, so that might have been the case.
How harmony is the Bravura?
It's
fairly.
I know the Bravura is more than the Imperio, but okay, fair enough. I haven't looked at the Bravura in a while.
I'm not sure how, because that's the one they do more DSP on, right, for the Bravura. And
well, I think it's analog actually.
Oh yeah,
no, Bravura is DSP.
No, Bravura is the DSP.
Yeah, and they do it to make it more Harman-like, right? So that's, but it is interesting because if you look at the bass profile for it, it's the bass shelf also looks like a driver resonance frequency boost. I'm not sure if that's why, but that's what it looks like. Kind of the way that the HE1 does it as well, right? Where it's like this kind of upwards thing, and then it's
step,
step. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Someone in chat says Bravura sounds like a mumble. I kind of agree. The treble actually bugs me on it.
That's great.
No, I've never had that with him. But I do know what you mean about like clamping.
I'll be right back. Go on without me.
I have a headphone.
Okay.
So this is a headphone that a lot of people love for its look, but I think it looks rather bad, gaudy, ostentatious. Basically, all the things I don't like in a headphone design. And
1266.
People have the same thing to say about its comfort, but I also feel the same way. Where
how does Justin Trudeau feel about it?
I'm telling you that right now.
Oh, okay.
But for me, the cups are too small, and in general, the feeling of the material of them just isn't quite as luxurious as you would think from just looking at it on a stand. In terms of its sound, I found it. No. In terms of its sound, I found it to be
Meze 109.
One of the grainiest headphones I've ever heard in my life.
99 Classics.
Sorry?
99 Classics?
No. What did you say, Andrew?
109.
It is 109.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thing's an
It does
absolute
have a bit
grain
of the
silo.
grain. It does have the grain. I know what you're talking about.
It has a lot of grain.
Grain silo. That should be a new headphone marketing tactic.
That is
branding.
a good.
The grain silo.
Yeah. I remember the Can Jam. I think it was 2023, maybe even 2022 when they were showing the prototype for that. And like I got the vibe from the guy showing it that it was like going to be like their newest, cheapest headphone. I was like, oh, okay, cool. This is like going to be at like either 99 Classics range or maybe a little bit below it. So I was like, this is going to be like what, like $200, $250? And they're like, we're thinking more like 700. And then I think it ended up being more than that.
I like it. I do hear the grain. I like the overall sound signature that it has. I like it a lot more than the there's the 105 that they have that's coming out. I hope
I still
that
haven't
was
heard that.
Okay. Cameron, you like the 105, right?
Yes, I can't remember.
Cameron is a fun enjoyer.
Impressions too much. I am a fun enjoyer. I can't
It's
remember
true.
too much detail about it from Munich, but I do remember liking it.
To me, that
I
one
had
was
more impressions in the Munich video.
Right. To me, that one was the grain silo much more. Actually, in the 109, I heard multiple units. Not all of them were grain silos.
Okay.
It's interesting you mention that because when I was listening to the 109s at Munich, I do remember thinking, I swear these don't sound as good as the pair that I've got here.
Yeah, so there is a bit of variation.
Yeah.
Well, that's
I mean,
less
at the
than
time, it's just
ideal.
like, well, maybe it's just because I'm at a show and I haven't listened in a while. But
No, it's.
I
noticed it. I noticed
enough to know.
Yeah.
Which headphone is this?
Oh,
the
the
109.
109 Pro.
I think there's some unit variation to that one.
I
I
think
think
109 was the first time that they did an in-house dynamic driver, so
that's right.
it would kind of be expected that there's a bit more variation going on there, I suppose.
Is that a biocellulose driver? Do you know?
I think so, yeah.
Try eating it.
That would explain the gratuitous scratchiness in the treble.
Hey, a driver story doesn't matter, man. Come on, what are you talking about? Meme marketing.
Continuous driver surface area does matter.
Okay.
So I have one if you guys are still going on this.
Go ahead.
So this is a headphone that I really like that almost no one likes.
HD800.
How dare you?
I'm wearing HD800. I'm just joking.
No. So honestly though, if my HD800 fell apart tomorrow, this is a headphone I would strongly consider to replace it.
DT880.
It's really nicely put together. It's quite ergonomic.
DT990.
I think it has no. So no.
Someone says HD820.
Right. So anyway, it has a lot of people say it's a bit bass shy, but to be entirely honest, I find that it's quite present. It's just about how I like it. The low frequencies don't overpower anything, but they're still very much present and authoritative.
So it is bright as the sun.
HD 650.
No.
I think I know what it is. Is it a Stax headphone?
It is not.
Oh, okay.
So no, the treble, honestly, actually, the mids and treble are quite different to it. Well, I can't say that. The presentation of vocals and the presentation of detail are quite a bit different to Stax. Whereas female vocals on the Stax might have a somewhat forward character, I'd say that they're quite relaxed on this. Whereas on a Stax, Whereas on a Stax, you have a sort of tendency towards the ethereality of the treble. I'd say that this is more cold, perhaps even metallic to some.
It's just always.
It's definitely a much more weighty headphone, not in the sense necessarily of heaviness, but in the sense of impact and authority in the bass. It's a headphone that I would be pretty comfortable daily driving, I think, both from a standpoint of ergonomics and from sound.
Is this an older headphone?
It is not.
It's a newer headphone.
Sony MDR MV1?
Oh, MDR 7506.
No. The 7506 is not comfortable, dude.
I know. Okay.
We might need a hint about price range.
Oh, Austrian audio composer.
He got it.
Hey,
That's
well,
it, yeah.
I was waiting for this because
Bass
there's
light?
only 2 headphones. What?
People say that's
Yeah.
bass light.
Yeah,
It's
because it doesn't
flat,
have this.
perfectly flat.
Yeah, it doesn't. It has neither a mid bass hump nor does it have a Harman shelf.
You know what headphone? I'd be curious what you think of it, Blaine. Is the Cosmo?
The Moondrop?
Yeah.
I do not think Blaine would like the Cosmo.
No, you wouldn't be able to use it. I'm just curious what you think of the sound. Like the ergonomics.
I've never
are
heard
not-
it. I would be willing to
Like
listen
it's
to it.
heavier. I'm mostly just curious what you think of the bass level, because to me that's a headphone that has it's got a coloration in the mids, and also the treble, like the ear gain is relaxed, so you wouldn't like it for those reasons. But the bass to treble kind of balance and the way, sort of contour of the way that the ear gain is, I'd be curious what you think of the bass level on that headphone.
I'd be interested to try it. Capra says, get a strap for the 7506. The headband is not the problem with the 7506. The pads are.
Absolutely not. Yeah, the pads
These are
are
bad.
absolutely atrocious.
Cameron, do you have any others?
Okay. I'm going to give you a hint and say that it's an old one, because otherwise it will not happen. So,
Klipsch
if you take
Heritage
sort of
HP3. I'm just kidding.
No. That's not that old. If you
name.
take the treble and then just kind of get rid of that, and then
Okay, so
take
this-
the
this-
bass and then just kind of get rid of that.
I do think at the point where we're saying this, also, I know what this is already, but I'd like to
Take
say we're
TH,
probably
Jeff?
getting. No, I know what this is, and it's not that. It's a British company that made this, and I know exactly who it is. I've talked to the designer of this headphone. Anyway, no, but
Dharma
we probably
acoustic?
shouldn't just say bass and treble, because then we're getting out of the.
Yeah.
Okay,
if
sorry.
we are,
it
it
has
shouldn't
no
be about
sound
absolute
stage and
level.
it has no impact.
So it's the
It's
Enigma.
Flare Audio
very,
R1.
very warm and lush.
It's the Flare Audio R1, right?
No.
Really
Yes.
interesting.
And it's older.
Because that literally
Yeah.
is an old headphone that has no bass and treble.
Is it from
I mean,
Stax?
to be fair, they're making
No.
that.
Because there's
No,
a really
not
old
like
one
the
that-
R1. You don't
Aesthetically
understand
very
how bad they are.
reminiscent in a way of the Jacqueline float.
Is this a Spirit Torino?
No.
Aesthetically
the Jacqueline.
reminiscent of the Jacqueline. The floats are the ones that are the big. It's like the
Big-
helmet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It reminds me of those in aesthetically.
I
Sigma.
might not even know about this headphone.
No.
Is it?
Not Sigma.
This is not a RAL. What's the name of the?
It's an old
SR1A?
headphone.
It's an old.
Yeah,
it's a-
I was sure there'd be the SR Sigma.
Big
It's-
rug phone.
Yeah, it's got very warm and lush mids with a strong emphasis on male vocals. Very
Great.
little detail to speak of.
Okay.
I mean, so at this point, I don't think any of us even know the headphone.
Is
Okay,
So
I was
what,
hoping
what,
that
what
one of you might-
brand? So no, what continent is the brand that made it come from?
Britain.
Okay, so it
What
is
did you say,
British.
Blaine?
Hang on,
What's the
wait.
name of it?
I'm going to reveal the top of the headband and then see if you get it.
What did you say?
Okay.
Blaine? Flare.
Well, the original thing I thought was the Flare Audio Reference R1, because that
Flare.
meets all of the descriptions. It's Flare, FLARE.
Reference R1.
Sorry, I also just realized it's not
familiar.
Britain, it's Denmark. Not
Denmark.
Oh,
Yes.
Denmark. Oh no,
Sorry,
I
I
know
keep-
this. It's that old B&O. I know exactly what model this is. I can picture it in my brain. It's the planar that they call an isodynamic, and it looks. It
Yeah.
has those flat panels. Yes.
Yeah, that's the one.
I've
It's the
never heard of
U70.
Oh,
Have you not? Oh, they're
No.
atrocious. They're horrible, but
Okay.
they're kind of fun. This is why they sort of remind me of the Jacqueline float.
Yeah. No.
Yeah,
it's-
no,
it's-
They're actually
blockiness
still
is
better than the
definitely-
Flare Audio R1, though.
I've not had the misfortune of hearing those, and luckily, I guess.
Hold on, I'm gonna post the
Yeah.
frequency response in the fucking
from Tile.
yeah.
It's Hobby Talk saying, "Of course, it's British. It has no flavor." It's
Got him.
would have been good.
No
No,
fun.
but seriously, look at this, Cameron.
Where
Look
are you
at this,
posting it?
everyone. It's in the
Yeah,
live stream
in the
planning
chat.
channel.
I'll post it in the
Oh,
YouTube
wow.
chat. as well.
Can I post links in the YouTube chat?
You should be able
It's
to, as long as
okay.
your account's a mod.
It's not because they won't.
Oh god, that's like take TH2 levels of bad.
What do we think, chat?
Put just Griffin, you can put the link in there.
It's already on the screen.
Okay.
I think that somewhere in this article there is a measurement of the R1 because it was stand out for being a fucking.
Can you,
dog.
Griffin? Can you change the card? We're still on Apple AirPods updates
Based.
on mine. Or have you changed it? Okay, maybe in my stream.
Yeah, we're on Subjectivist Challenge.
Okay, good. All right.
But yeah, no, the R1 is it's real bad.
Fire.
It's an A-shaped FR.
It really
It
is
a
an
sound
A-shaped
crime.
And when you said when you didn't deny British, I was like, this is the only thing this can be. There are so few British
I got that
headphones
wrong.
and this perfectly matches.
Okay. Shall we? Let's move on. We do have a topic for Fight Club.
We do.
It's a good one. I think.
I'm probably going to dip out after Fight Club because I probably should get back to editing.
Yeah, we
That's
probably
fine.
don't have much more time. So, the topic is: should reviewers have technical knowledge? And I'm kind of still on the fence about this, right? Because, like, on the one hand, I think at the very least, it's helpful if reviewers have heard kind of like the staple things that everybody sort of knows, so you have like a similar reference point. At the same, so some knowledge is useful, right?
Well, but is that technical?
But is that
I would
technical
describe that
knowledge,
as
right?
experiential.
That's
Yeah.
Frank Jackson knowledge. Yeah. So really the question is, should reviewers have technical knowledge, or is Frank Jackson knowledge good enough?
I think the way I'd put it is you don't. I wouldn't say you need to have technical knowledge, but you need to have a willingness to accept new technical knowledge. I think if you're a reviewer, but you're also the kind of person that is going to completely refuse to gain any understanding of some of the more like mechanical or objective characteristics of stuff, then that puts you at a significant disadvantage.
But what if you had a strong passion for sound and that
then-
overpowered your desire there?
but also the second thing I was going to say is that you kind of need to have enough knowledge to know when something is going. There's a number of reviewers that I've seen that I can't really put any faith into sort of their subjective takes on things, because I've seen some of their subjective takes on things which just make no sense, like fuses. You know, if the reviewer is saying that they got a massive increase in soundstage or whatever from this fuse, how can I possibly take seriously their take on whether this headphone has good soundstage or not? Because to me, that kind of thing just screams that they don't have the technical knowledge to know that that's bullshit, and they don't have the willingness to do any sort of testing or understanding in a way that would help to combat placebo in some sort of way. So it makes the rest of their content hard to trust.
But here's sort of the counter to that. Where's the downside in somebody just reporting their impressions, genuinely, and actually giving consistent reports despite not having the technical knowledge? Like you can find.
Cameron's point is that if someone reports that they consistently find that
I get that.
Fuses increase sound
yes,
stage.
of course. Yeah, totally. I'm just saying, like, you can. So that's one scenario, but there's another scenario where somebody doesn't have technical knowledge and their reports are consistent, right? They're not talking about the fuses thing, right? They're just giving, and I would say there are many examples within our community of people who don't have technical knowledge, who are just giving their reports and they have their preferences and things are fairly consistently,
There's reviewers and, in fact, individual people that I will sort of regularly speak to ask their opinions on products. They might not necessarily have any particular technical understanding, or and everything they're saying is purely a subjective description. But I trust what they're saying because of their consistency in the past and the fact that what they've said has tracked very well with what I've perceived myself. It's just that if you don't have any kind of technical knowledge, it puts you, I think, at further risk of being less consistent and being influenced by things that you shouldn't be influenced by.
Yeah.
Like,
So
you don't
this
have
also
to have technical knowledge to be a good reviewer, but it definitely helps to provide a better understanding of the product or why something might be good, because that stuff's just interesting to talk about. You know, when I talk about certain aspects of a DAC or whatever in my reviews, it's not always that like, oh, well, that's directly correlating to sound quality. It's just that that's kind of interesting, and that people might be willing to pay more for something that they know that genuine engineering has gone into, even if it doesn't make an audible difference. But the kind of people that don't have any technical understanding and have been inconsistent, potentially as a result of that to some degree, that's where it starts to get tricky. It's not a prerequisite, but it puts you at risk of being less useful subjectively.
Something that's interesting here, and I, as the guy who actually came up with this question, I didn't actually think about this, but someone in chat, Whiskey Omega, says, I don't trust MKBHD. And that's an interesting example, because MKBHD is not someone who is a snake oil drinker, but he is someone who is accurately described as having no technical knowledge of audio. So there's another, like, we're sort of thinking of no technical knowledge people as being pure subjectophiles, but there's also people who are simply completely unaware of audio physics, who are coming in from other review angles, who don't necessarily buy into the snake oil, but just have no idea how any of this shit works.
I mean, my personal sort of gripe with more, I don't mean this in a sort of overly negative way, but commercialized reviewers like MKBHD. The issue is that it's a little bit too much of a sort of marketing regurgitation sometimes. Like, I like when reviewers get down into the nitty-gritty of stuff, which kind of needs a little bit of technical understanding. And when someone is just sort of telling me the features of a product, I can just read the product page for that. Like,
I've always found him to be much too prone to pull punches as well. But I think that's more a person. Ironic, given he was accused of killing multiple brands. But
yeah, I think that he does seem to be a little bit diplomatic with certain companies, and other ones he's totally fine being rightly harsh. It's just that I don't necessarily think that harshness is always equally applied.
To your point, Cameron, and I don't think this necessarily means like all reviewers should have technical knowledge, but one of the core functions of a reviewer, to my mind, a good reviewer at least, is to evaluate whether like a product actually meets the promises of its marketing.
Yeah.
And when you are someone like MKBHD and you can't honestly evaluate those things because you just don't have the knowledge to assess the veracity of those claims, yeah, the reviews are of a lower value, in my opinion. Andrew, you're muted.
No, leave
yeah, I mean, it's like I'm into cars, but I wouldn't review cars because I don't have the technical knowledge to actually evaluate all of the promises that manufacturers make, and the technical details about how certain things will relate to certain use cases and whatnot. I'm not in a position where I feel I'd be able to do that, even though I have an interest in it. I can get in a car and tell you whether I think it's good or not, but I don't think that I would be capable of reviewing thoroughly a car.
So the example, to go back to the MKBHD thing, you can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So if he's going to review a product like the Galaxy Buds, right, something from Samsung, right, because those are the types of products that he might cover. I don't think that he's the kind of person who can correctly say or appropriately say, yes, they've achieved Harman IE with this tuning, right? Because that's not part of the evaluation. At the same time, I don't know that it matters. I don't know how much it matters, I guess is the point that I would get to, right? Like, does it really matter if, I mean, like the product, this is kind of somewhat counter to what Griffin was saying, but like if the product's marketing claim might be something, I'm not saying it is this, but it might be something along the lines of like, corresponds or agrees with the Harman target, right? Like matches the Harman target, achieves it in some way. It doesn't matter that much to me whether or not the reviewer can verify it if they're able to tell me whether or not it sounds like shit.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and also like if we're thinking about Cameron reviewing a car, like there's a kind of consumer,
Carmarin,
namely
if you will.
me, who if I were like looking for a review of a car, I might want something that isn't quite as technical, and want someone who's more enthusiastic because they know less.
I mean that's a good point. Like there's also the degree where MKBHD is targeting a much broader audience. He's not targeting the people watching this stream. He is going for something which is, but it's like if I wanted a laptop review, if you are a general consumer wanting to know if something was like just fine to buy or bad, and what some key features about it or whatever, an MKBHD video is probably the best thing to watch, and his videos are exceptionally well made. If you are more technical and wanting to know, about the sort of long-term thermal performance of it, noise profile, and how it performs in different loads and different specific benchmarks and stuff.
Jared's laptops.
Okay,
yeah.
There you go. There's channels for that. Same as with headphones. If you're wanting to know, does this sound absolutely terrible or does it sound good? MKBHD is, well, for the most part, fine. The problem, okay. I say fine as in. Actually, yeah, maybe that's not true. I'm just thinking back to his HD820 video now. You know what? I take that back.
I was going to say it's Microsoft Surface.
No, but hold on to your point though. There is a sense in which, like, imagine you were not into audio, right? And he is giving an account of somebody, the experience that somebody might get of a product who is not at all into any of this and doesn't understand any of it, and that's still a valid perspective to have. Right. It's just that I think you kind of need to know that, right? Like you need to understand that this is not an expert in the subject matter whatsoever. And they're just giving their normal person, super based take. Right. Yeah. And I don't really have that much of an issue if that's the way that it's intended to be. It's almost like you're treating it as if they're like, an unprimed blank slate, right? It just, this is their raw reaction. And as long as you know that, I don't have too much of an issue with it.
I think there's, because there's levels of there's levels of consumer enthusiasm as well, which pertain to the kind of reviews that they will want to watch. I don't think that there is a single correct way to do a review, because if you do something like laptops or even, Gamers Nexus, that's not ideal for the general consumer. Same as in audio, the average consumer just wants to know if this headphone sounds good or not. They don't want to learn what an HRTF is and try and understand how to read a frequency response. Same as like if, one of you guys was trying to buy a coffee machine or a coffee grinder, you don't want to go like, okay, well, what is the fines versus larger particles distribution out of this grinder, which some review channels get into that kind of
This
detail.
is actually something we should probably delineate. There are some people that do that with every major purchase.
Yes,
who obsess about the details of every. Yeah, I think that Andrew probably would look into that.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
No, I'm guilty
I'm
of
okay
that
with,
to some extent myself.
I'm fine with people not doing
here,
that,
but
I wouldn't expect people to do that, though. That's the thing, right?
No, you wouldn't expect it, but I think a lot of the people here do that when we are doing a purchase.
Yeah. Well,
a big one,
I do it because I'm poor.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of the mindset of like, I'm not going to be able to get another one of these for a while. I want to get the right one.
Especially with things like cars, right? Or like big,
I mean, cars are massive. I mean,
you'd have to be insane not to research a car purchase.
Yeah. It's like what's the threshold? I was thinking about this too, because what car would I have purchased if I had not purchased a Toyota Corolla, right? What would that have been? And there are a number on the list, and I did try all of them, but ultimately it came down to the fact that I like, what is the better long-term value, and it just ended up being that one. And that's is everybody going to have the same, like for some people it might be what's the driving feel like, because that ultimately matters more to them than the long-term reliability of the engine or whatever, right? And I think I mean, for this actually kind of goes back to, like, Blaine, you mentioned Throttle House, right, for cars, and
love
it's
those
like
guys.
That is a great example of like a review channel where like they give you the understanding of what it might be like to actually drive the thing and have what the level of joy is for driving the thing. And that, it might not be as relevant to me as, some of the other stuff that I would have researched, but I think to the average person, it's highly relevant. Another example is the straight pipes.
Someone
and Savage Geese.
Aren't they all Canadian as well?
They are, I think.
It's very odd. I know that the Straight Pipes are, and I think that Savage Geese is as well. Certainly the name sounds Canadian.
Wait, Savage Geese is Canadian? No, that can't be right. I don't think Savage Geese is Canadian.
So what I was going to say about your example, Andrew, about how, you know, obviously MKBHD's perspective is valid and perhaps even better for some consumers than other, depending on what they're looking for and what kind of, you know, rigor they're applying to their pre-purchase decision. I have much less of a problem with that sort of thing than what I see in some places where a person is actually that kind of person, where they're mostly just relying on kind of their subjective experience and, you know, whatever comes with that. But then they utilize data incorrectly to try and post hoc justify whatever their subjective impression or
unfortunately Savage Geese is one of those. But only
I mean, I think there are a lot of people like that. I mean, I think a lot of people who utilize data are prone to doing things like that.
Cargo cult.
Yeah, that bothers me because they're basically, they don't care enough about the data to understand it, but they want to use the implied authority that comes with it.
Right. Is there
well, and in many cases they believe that they understand it better than they do, right?
Yes, that's the problem.
Is there an example that, like, currently that you can think of it, or is this not to do with audio? Where
not that I want to give a name to on this stream.
Yeah, definitely people in audio that do that, and I think.
I mean,
what's like an example not in audio that where somebody would do that?
Oh, I don't know. I only exist in audio. I don't have any other hobbies.
That's fair.
Well, I mean, Savage Geese and car measurements, audio measurements is a good
That's
example.
the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Honestly,
but like, I also
to some extent, some of LMG's car measurements haven't been great.
Definitely, yeah. I kind of don't mind in Savage Geese's case because I don't really take, like, at the very least he shows measurements and he's starting to do that, right? So I kind of feel like maybe he'll
but he also focuses on stuff that does not make any sense. And also, like, we know that he has been repeatedly reached out to by Harman's Automotive, like one of their leads, to try to offer to help with that, and he's not taking them on that.
I think generally speaking, more opinions about a product is pretty much always a good thing as long as you are being genuine about it. If a review is not providing your actual opinion, i.e. you are being intentionally malicious or saying something that you don't mean for one of a number of reasons, that's not good. And whether or not an honest opinion about a product is provided based on purely subjective means or with good objective analysis and data as well, I would prefer if it did have more objective stuff in it, but more subjective stuff, if you can't provide that and don't have the technical knowledge or whatever, is still fine. I think the kind of reviews that I see as actually detrimental are either the ones where people are genuinely trying to just stir stuff and saying things for attention, or the ones where people are intentionally or sometimes unintentionally, in which case they can't help it because they were doing it unintentionally, at least at first, misusing data and coming to conclusions that are detrimental to the consumers and the manufacturers involved. In those situations, the important thing is just to sort of try and talk about it and try and have it corrected. And, you know, there are channels and groups and people which will, if you don't have the technical knowledge at the beginning, but you want to start providing more data, like even LTT. LTT is a massive group. They didn't know how to provide ideal data on audio stuff or power supplies or whatever right at the beginning. It's a curve that takes a little bit of time to develop. So I think as long as you're actually doing it in good faith, it's generally okay. It doesn't really matter too much.
What about, you say more reviews is good. What about more reviews of the purple fuses?
Or more reviews of things that are deliberately obfuscating the truth, you know? Like,
well,
I mean, there's...
I mean, that's where I say, like, you know, you want to have an open mind and want to, like, you don't want to be, you don't want to have your mind so open that your brain falls out. You want to have enough technical knowledge to know when something is obviously bullshit. But it's like, you know, MQA, take that as an example. There are a bunch of people who said that they preferred MQA subjectively, and that's fine. I think that, you know, people should talk about their opinions on it. And I never said that I didn't like the sound of MQA. I prefer lossless, but I didn't talk about that. But you have to have some level of technical knowledge or willingness to go into it to do the sort of analysis required to test their promises. But I don't think that the subjective evaluations of the feature is a bad thing, even though I don't like the product.
Even in the case of, so the question is, what if a product is fundamentally bad for the community? Again, I'm going to focus on the fuses here just because we can all agree it would be better if that company turned into dust and blew away in the wind. Aren't more reviews of things like that an active negative because they decrease the signal to noise ratio?
I would agree. Yeah.
Well, no, I would hope that overall more reviews of that would lead to more people saying, no, this doesn't make a difference.
But unfortunately, is that even the case? What because it's such a cyclical, it's like a feedback.
I don't know.
Right? The people
who
are going to
feel that way
buy
generally
those
don't
things.
review those products.
Yeah, exactly. Like the people who are going to review them are also probably the people who are like fuse build, and then that's going to lead to
yeah. I mean,
fuse pilled current
That's
cells.
a good point. I guess the distribution of willingness to believe in fanciful promises is skewed in terms of the Venn diagram of people willing to review a product and willing to believe the promises of there's a fairly heavy overlap.
I think
there.
Cameron, in like an ideal world where like everybody has access to everything and everything gets a fair or equal visibility, then I think that's true, right? Like, but we're talking about like the niche of the niche of the niche and snake oil within that. It's like, or the people who what's the JPS cables or whatever, right? Like the people who are into that kind of stuff. It's a self-fulfilling, cycle.
I have a bit of another take on that, though, which is that I think that for some of those products, even no matter how many reviews of them saying that they did nothing or that they made things worse even or whatever were out there, I think that many of the people who buy them would simply just buy them anyway. I almost feel like some of those people cannot have their mind changed.
I have a slightly related take to this, and it relates to the more commonplace subjective evaluations of headphones, where you think to yourself, like, how could somebody come up with a positive impression of this product that I've tested and I know is awful, measures awful, but somebody might like it. And I keep coming back to this. It's that people like music, and when they put a headphone on, it's already prone to bias towards a positive experience because people are listening to the music rather than focusing on whether or not this is a good delivery vehicle for it. And if the music is something that they like, their experience is already primed for positivity. And so then we end up with these kind of like skewed, like it's like, yeah, okay, but you haven't actually like bothered to do an evaluation of the thing, so
music do be dope though.
Music do be dope, and that is the framing effect that we're all sort of like stuck in.
Well, I think that a lot of us, as we get jaded, kind of overcompensate to just default to a negative impression of.
Yeah. Like if you're right. I mean, if you're gonna actually try and review headphones, and people often say like, oh yeah, listen to the music, not the gear. But I feel like if you're reviewing the headphones, you got to listen to the gear, right, to be able to get a sense of
the job.
That's the job. Yeah. So, kind of like you have to. There's so much that you have to abstract away from what your normal condition might be. When like I was on my when I was driving, I'm staying at my parents' place, and that's like it was like an 8-hour drive last night because traffic, whatever. But like I was in the car listening to shitty car speakers, and I was still able to enjoy the music because music is good, and people are having these experiences with the products that they buy. Purchase validation then creeps in as well, and you're like, oh, I bought a thing, it's good because music is good, right? So you have these cycles that constantly lead to. It's not even copium treadmill. Copium treadmills are when people are talking about it online and having their support groups. But it's like, positive experience treadmills because music is.
I mean, that's a little bit of an interesting one because then you get into the difference between sort of the likelihood of being biased towards being positive about something as a general consumer versus as a reviewer, either because you spent your own money on it, because you've not heard enough other things, because of the environment that you're hearing it in or whatever. Like there's a lot of factors there. I don't know. I mean,
it's the wonderful analogy that I think Blaine gave before, where the headphone or whatever we're talking about here is the ice cream cone, not the ice cream. And if the ice cream is still good, you can often ignore the fact that the cone was made from recycled toilet paper.
I mean, honestly, like you'd be amazed how shitty so many ice cream cones are.
It's true.
Like some of them are just like they taste like cardboard. Literally.
Yeah.
It's bizarre.
Yeah.
Also, I'd like
think
to propose that there is we can form a meme dichotomy here between the virgin music enjoyer and the Chad trained listener.
Yeah.
I don't think that benefits the discourse at all.
The other thing about sort of reviews and like, should reviewers have this or should reviewers be doing this is I think almost anyone else will, kind of pick and choose which reviewers they pay attention to or put more weight and faith in based on how they do things. And so like, I guess I don't personally mind too much when there is a reviewer that is doing things in a way that I wouldn't personally do, because it's like, well, you've said some stuff about these products which are complete nonsense, so I kind of just know not to pay too much attention, so I just don't. But then it's like, well, is the average consumer necessarily going to know why fuses can't make a difference? Or
but I have a question for you.
And to be fair,
yeah,
go ahead, Blaine.
Andrew, ask a question.
Well, I was going to ask if you think that there is a responsibility. Like, is there such a thing as being irresponsible because you're not giving? Yeah, and so in that
the irresponsibility for me comes in when you are either being intentionally dishonest or you are being lazy. You know that you can do something or know that you should do something and you opt not to because it's hard or takes time.
Yeah,
those are the two things that are.
My threshold for laziness is pretty high. Like, I think that
which is absolutely fair enough.
But
the issue for me comes in like if someone genuinely doesn't actually know better and is genuinely trying to act in good faith, how do you police? Someone comes along and says, no, you can't make reviews.
Yeah, this is why I think
hang on, you totally can.
Yeah.
Who gets to decide who can and can't say their opinion when they are all trying to act in good faith? That's the problem for me. So as long as people are genuinely trying to do the right thing and willing to engage and discuss, because there are some people who think that they're doing the right thing, but are unwilling to engage in discussion or about why they might be able to improve certain things. That's bad. But I just consider that as a form of malice. But outside of that, if you are either doing something that you know is wrong or not doing something that you know you should be doing because you are being lazy, those are the things which for me
bad faith and laziness
disqualify a review.
Those are bad faith and laziness. I agree. Yeah.
Dixter in chat said something. I want to return to the fuse thing after this, but Dixter in chat said something so wrong I have to read it. People can tell if a reviewer is bad or not. The bad ones don't last very long, and the better ones get more followers.
Yeah, but
I highly disagree with that.
Like, it doesn't have the better ones have more followers. The worst. Yeah, the ones that don't have technical knowledge often have more followers.
Yeah, I mean, like this whole industry is in the dark. Oh.
At the end of the day, if getting followers and in fact channel longevity was the only concern, that's a marketing exercise, not an exercise in putting out actually useful reviews. You can do things in a way which will lead to better success on YouTube and longevity on YouTube that are not good in terms of the actual quality of your reviews. So I highly disagree with that, and I think I'm not going to name any names, but there are definitely examples of.
I am quite surprised at the popularity of certain channels where it's very demonstrably like this is nonsense. Like,
yeah.
There's also a lot of popularity for some flat Earth channels, so like there's certainly a question.
I suppose, but there is also
where are you getting into the lizard man's constant kind of group of people?
Yeah, there is also like the issue of like botting, like a lot, like there are channels that are doing that. I'm not like I am aware of one example.
Should we do that?
Well, okay, like is there a downside? Like probably. But like seems like it's happening,
Yeah, I mean, there's at least, in fact, there's two different things I can. Well, actually, no, one wasn't technically botting, but there's definitely one quite large audio review publication, which I don't know if any of their followers are real.
You said that you just went black as you.
Oh, did I?
Yeah,
no,
they cut the feed.
They've got me.
Big audio reviewers after camera.
So I'm going to wait until he's back because there is actually, I think, so we tend to sort of brush away, for obvious reasons, because it's insane, the idea that a fuse can have an impact on sound quality. But actually, it's not really that much more insane than a number of the other things that people accept.
Okay.
Hey, I'm arguing the devil's advocacy for fuses have sound.
Oh god! I was sorry. Just before that, I just want to make one point. There are literal review sites that have been shown to literally just be completely either AI generated or plagiarized, and manufacturers still send them stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Blows my mind.
Oh, wait, manufacturers send them to the AI generated ones?
Yes.
Why bother to send something to an AI generated review?
Because they don't care. They just care that it's getting attention. They don't care that the review isn't genuine. They just care that it's a marketing exercise.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's bad.
No, the
fuses
the
make
botting
sense,
one
Blaine.
is the one that everybody knows is botting or has been calling out for botting for a while.
Oh, wait, that's not an audio specific one. I think is the one you mean.
No, there is a channel that is audio specific that everybody has called out for botting.
Which one
I don't know if I know the one. There's one audio specific one, but I don't know if it's the one that you're thinking.
If everyone's called it out,
it the one that gets called?
Are you worried about the being named in the libel suit?
Now I am.
Fucking coward.
It starts with a consonant, right?
Yes.
Golden
well, there's
sound.
two. There's two that I'm pretty confident are. One of them gets called out.
Okay, I know who you were talking about. Yeah. And botting is not the only problem there. Like everything we've talked about where like knowing that there are ways for you to improve and then purposely being ignorant of those things, also guilty of that.
Dixter says Zeus is not an AI person. Yeah, I think that
Damn right.
AI's
That's a real MF
ethical
right there.
restrictions on generative content would prevent AI from putting some of the things Zeus has put on screen. So no, fuses though. And this applies also to conductors, right? There are measurable effects of these devices, right? Like a fuse by its nature is a nonlinear device. And it's nonlinear, particularly with respect to current through it. Because its whole job, obviously, is to blow at some point. But obviously, a competently designed power supply is not going to care that much. Like, it's not going to have substantial ripple if you're having the source resistance rise and fall by, 0.1 ohms. And a competently designed amplifier has enough power supply rejection to reject that anyway. But here's the thing. There is something there. There is a measurable thing there that is as measurable, if you look in the right ways, as a lot of the other things people point to in this industry. And is about as likely as many of them to be audible.
If a fuse made a difference, though, if a fuse did make an audible difference, though, what that would actually be saying is that the power supply in your device is beyond terrible.
Oh, of course. Well, power supply and the amplifier. Like, your amplifier should have enough PSR anyway.
But the other side of it is that the color of the fuse is really what's making the difference.
That's true. If it's pink, you get more grip than if it's purple.
That's right.
So no, I like to devil's advocate that one and cable conductors because, I mean, it's the same thing, right? Like copper and silver conductors are going to have technically different temperature coefficients of resistance. And that means there is going to be a tiny amount of cable distortion. It's going to be lower than everything else probably, but it does exist.
There are some people who put actual little silver bars in place of their fuses because, house insurance is for losers anyway. So,
I mean, honestly,
based.
Yeah. I mean, have you seen that chart of different fuses and it's got like the foil wrapped cheese and the wrench?
No.
Oh,
Andrew, you're muted as well, by the way.
Blaine, you need a sign that says "actually" on it. You can just
actually
every time. Okay, let's just do a quick round of spicy hour, guys. But we do all have to leave early today, except for Blaine.
Wait, hold on.
We're gonna censor him.
Give us some spicy takes.
Give us the peppers, and we will.
All right, chat. Peppers out. Let's go.
Peppers out. Peppers out for Harambe.
Why are you like this?
Okay, hang on. I have a small. I don't know if this is really a spicy take, but just because it's something which has been brought up by a few people recently. I absolutely could not give a toss about any sort of like Dolby Atmos or spatial audio thing in headphones unless there is head tracking involved.
Interesting.
Good take.
I don't think
Good
that's
take.
spicy.
There's
I
so
mean, I
many
think-
products I've seen where it's like, oh, it's got Dolby Atmos support, but it's like just normal headphones, no head tracking or anything. And I'm like, why?
I think like the Sonos. I could be wrong about this.
Yeah, I think
that
you might
had
be right.
Spatial, but no head tracking.
I mean, at that point,
I mean,
it's
it's like,
just
well,
like
it's
a different
just
mix,
an EQ,
right?
basically.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just a mix. Well, it's
It
technically
was
not just a fixed
Dolby
EQ because
capable.
it'll affect different objects differently.
Yeah.
But still, it's like
Bumping this.
I just can't get into it because it removes almost all the benefit of it.
So,
And if anyone has a VR headset, with Oculus, I know there was a tool to actually pause the like head tracking, so it would just freeze the thing in place. And I tried that a little while ago, just in like a lobby in some game. I think it was Echo VR or something. And when you're wearing this and moving around and playing the game, or just even in the same spot and looking around and stuff, the spatial audio is incredible. And then if you just freeze the head tracking or just hold your head really still, it's like this is literally nothing special anymore, because so much of the localization information comes when you are moving your head.
So here's what I'll say. While I agree that I personally am not interested in that at all, when it comes to spatial audio's proliferation as like a legitimate medium wherein engineers are making a separate mix for that, I kind of understand the utility in headphones, because in headphones, most mixes are not made for headphones. They're made for 2-channel speakers, and then we kind of forcibly smush them into headphones. I could see a scenario where mixing them for headphones does actually, if not on average, in certain cases, actually just sound better for the medium you're listening in. Now, that doesn't make it compelling enough for me. Like, I'm perfectly happy just using the 2-channel stereo mixes in my headphones. Thank you.
Yeah.
But yeah, the draw for spatial audio absolutely has to do with tracking and object-based audio through HRTF simulation.
I just need more mixes to be.
Yeah, okay, there's another one. All albums should be mandated to release in a speaker and a
Let's go.
headphone variant.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
yes. I was about to be really concerned, but I can agree with that. Rob Hawk says, in the not too distant future, adaptive ANC will be able to spontaneously remove opinions, facts, ideas, and individual voices you would rather not hear. God willing.
Oh, God. Rob Hawk,
the
I will
siloing
give
effect
you
will get
any
worse.
amount of money you want.
There's
And
nothing,
apparently he has
this is-
$160,000 now from Blaine. He's going to use it to buy Batiste, but
True
Harchu
Wireless was a
says-
mistake, and we should revert to using IEMs across the board. That's a bad take. True
yeah,
Wireless
that's a
IEMs
terrible
are great.
take.
I
opposite.
very much
I
enjoy
hate
not
having to
having
deal with cables.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love
like,
cables.
There
I
are
love
situations
dealing
where fidelity is just not the biggest thing. And True Wireless IEMs are good now.
If I don't have cables attached, it gives me anxiety. It's my anxiety cable.
Emotional support cables.
My emotional support cable.
So,
I take
question,
them on planes.
how do you feel about the ones that have the cable that's like the neckband cable?
The neckband.
Oh, the true
Have you not
wireless.
seen that?
Yeah,
Well, they're not
I
true
know.
wireless.
Yeah.
The wireless
No,
IEMs
they're wireless.
that have,
but
yeah.
I've never. If I've used them, the only ones I used would have been for the Odyssey when they had their thing like that. It's almost more annoying because it's now this weird thing behind you.
I mean, I find it very annoying. I asked because my cousin loses every pair of IEMs she's ever had, and that's the first one she hasn't lost.
Oh, there you go. There's a benefit. Okay, let's see.
Vinyl mastering is better than digital mastering if it is fully from analog.
Well, no.
Mastering's not really a...
SNR?
So the argument for vinyl mastering, and this is an old argument and it's broadly not true nowadays, but in theory, if you're being competent, vinyl has to have a certain amount of dynamic range. Right? Like, you can't have an extremely compressed master on vinyl, or at least you shouldn't. Now, the flip side is a lot of vinyl is just cut directly from the digital master. So, in theory, you might want people who are doing vinyl to use higher dynamic range content.
What is happening?
He's worshiping his cat. Anyway,
I'm playing with my baby. All right, chill out. I'm having a good time.
So that would also be desirable for CD or digital.
Yeah,
It's just
that's not like a vinyl thing. That's just loudness wars sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a dead meme at this point, honestly. The loudness war is over.
Exciting sparkly treble is just another way of saying too much treble.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's generally true.
I mean, you're pointing out a coloration, so I would say yes.
Yeah, there could be also though like it depends. Like you could say like there is sparkly upper treble, but the rest of the treble is like still kind of like.
Well, yeah, but you're saying that there's too much in the band you're talking about.
In the specific band you're talking about, yeah.
Enough that it's notable to be sparkly or something.
No.
So Cameron was trying to read Heart Use, which was there's nothing of value between the Edition XS and the LCD5 if you EQ.
HD 800 is between those things. How dare you?
But I mean, I get the premise. That is, there's no sound quality gains between those two things, and frankly, the ergonomics worsen between those two things. So,
yes, they do.
Reluctant Engineers got a point actually, which is they're surprised that we don't have a Squiglink database for our measurements.
Oh, we do.
Well, we have a database.
The closest is but the closest to that would be Griffin's because he pulls all the data.
I don't post any of our measurements on my.
Oh, it's not public.
Database.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I don't post any of your stuff or anyone else's stuff. I have them locally saved on my hard drive, and if people ask for an image or a comparison, I will deliver that to them. But I won't.
Yeah. So there are a couple reasons.
Leave it there.
Squiglink right now has all kinds of problems with it. Where actually, maybe you can educate me on this because I haven't paid attention to it recently. But the last time I looked into it, it had issues where effectively you could compare 5128 data with gross targets, like with the Harman target, like for
look. So
like
a lot of the problems with
Squiglink
are not to do with the platform itself necessarily. It's to do with the people uploading the measurements not caring about actual data curation. That's one thing. I mean, the actual platform itself, he does kind of give out access indiscriminately and then doesn't really like maintain any of it. So there's no like
it's a bit open source
master over. No, it is exactly open sourcey. It is the CRIN graph,
which let's be clear is bad inherently.
I would say it is bad for the state of information. Yes. Yeah, but I mean it also just is not great for showing the things that we are very interested in showing. Like in the paradigm of, just one target, just one rig.
I mean, you actually can implement preference bounds in a very janky way.
It's so visually unpleasant. It's so unpleasant.
That's what I did. It just doesn't look good.
Yeah, it's jank.
Yeah. So
there
are like a good few reasons we wouldn't use a Squiglink or a CRIN graph implementation. And it's simply because we don't want our thing to look bad.
But then also it's further from the truth because it's giving you less complete information.
Yeah. Now the flip side of that is if you are using a fork of CRIN graph and modify it to do a bunch of things like my dev has, where you can use HRTFs, preference bounds, individually compensate measurements and stuff like that. Then it becomes an issue of no one knows how to use it. Like the only people who can use my site are the 1% of the 1% of nerds who are so far sniffing into this hobby that frankly, they can't see the sun anymore.
And they may as well just use the system that we have once that's public.
I'm of the opinion that for such individuals, euthanasia is probably the correct course. I don't think that there's any other solution. I don't think there's any other solution for the suffering.
No, but I mean, in seriousness, though, like there's no, at least currently existing way within Squiglink to really guide someone through the process of using the tool in an intuitive way that makes the extra features that we would need implementable in a way that makes sense so that I don't have to go and do what I do now on Discord, which is basically teach everyone how to freaking use Squiglink or my site.
Yeah.
So it's
Okay. We've got a blessed
it's worth the
take
wait.
in here.
I promise.
God.
What's up?
We've got a take I very much like here.
What's up?
Headphone reviewers should engage in peer review more to increase the overall level of reviews in the industry. Reacts to other people's reviews.
I want this
Ryan
so
approved.
bad. I want this.
I'd
so
be up
bad.
for that. It's just that the problem with the audio hobby is that there's too many people that consider someone saying, "I had a different opinion about this product" as "fuck you." Like
that's
it's
not
not
why
the
you
same
have to
To be
thing.
clear,
You have
that's
to
what Blaine
preempt
wants.
it.
That's what Blaine wants.
I know Blaine wants people to fight. I would love to see people be able
Let
to
them fight.
do reactions and commentary on other people's reviews and input and stuff in a constructive and amicable way. The problem is that the
Yes.
audio hobby is also a bit of a drama fest sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's not going to be
actually-
constructive and amicable
Yes-
for most people.
Yes and no. I think people would actually be surpurprised how often this happens behind the scenes, though. Like,
Well, yeah,
and
but the
to be
difference
clear,
with behind
these are
the
the
scenes
only
is that you
reviewers
don't
I
have.
bothered.
Well, that's
Okay.
why we do reviews where it's like multiple of us talking about it. If in situations.
Oh
where we
well,
might
I'm not
review
even
the
talking
product
about
the
that.
same way.
Like,
No, I'm saying like
so like,
Go ahead.
yeah. So like, because I am a reviewer, you guys are reviewers, and like, frankly, we all know enough about this whole thing where like another person's interpretation of the experience doesn't matter that much to us because we know how much the experience is going to matter for us and how much that is going to differ. But the people that make a point to come to me and ask me and say, hey, what do you think of what I was talking about here? Whether it has to do with, their experience or the subjective things. Those are most of the reviews that I watch. And the people that are actually interested in that feedback are, in my opinion, the only people you guys should be paying attention to. Because the people who seek out the peer review are clearly the people who actually care about, like, not wasting your time and not giving you misinformation. Whereas the people who not only don't want peer... What's up?
Reluctant Engineer pitches the video Acoustic Engineer reacts to HD 600 reviews.
That would be such a good video, but I fear the videos, like the reviews, would all be positive and there might not be much there.
Yeah, you need to pick something more interesting.
It's more like
that.
for somebody reacts to somebody saying putting out a positive review, like the Audavina or something, right? And then you.
Well, yeah, because that's the problem with our industry is that it's much too positive or too prone to brush over.
I think there's a couple things
about
too,
product.
Right? Like,
it's much too positive about products. It's much too negative about people. Right? Like, well, I mean, it's true. Like, it's fairly hostile to people, but it's a fucking hug box for products.
I would also say that, to be honest, I think that we kind of do this to some degree already. Like, I mean, earlier in the stream, we were talking about ratings and some of the issues with their publication methodology.
Well, no, we do this.
But we do this, but we're the people that are often called elitists for doing it.
Yeah. Like when I did the blind testing video, I talked through some of the issues in a couple other blind test videos that people had put out. I think the tricky thing comes in when you're trying to comment on someone's just purely subjective opinion on a product. It's a lot easier, and I think can be much more easily done amicably when you're purely discussing sort of methodology and objectivity and stuff.
Well, it's difficult to do that.
There are some objective traits to every review, though. Like, there's a physical existence of headphones, and there's a lot of reviewers who are massively softballing the horrible ergonomic and mechanical problems that plague our industry. Or for that matter, the safety problems when it comes to electronics.
I think for a lot of people, though, they're considering, they're not actually, trying to use the product for an extended period of time. They're using it for 30 minutes at a time. And so they're not as acutely aware of the, crippling neck pain that is the result of, whatever cursed ergonomic thing that is like 700 grams.
Then there's also the question, though, of if we're wanting to do this sort of in a way where it is generally amicable, well, there's going to also be people where it's like, well, if I make this video and I do a review, then I know that people are going to accuse me of just making this a drama video because
and you become a pariah as a result.
That this person originally said they didn't like it when they thought they couldn't get one. Then when they did get one, they said that they did like it. Oh, and by the way, then they bought it at a discount, then resold it for 50% more. And it just, there's other things you have to comment on.
There's something good. Like, you guys are asking for something that in reality is a scenario that you probably wouldn't want, which is basically a pariah situation for every person who would do this, because of the way that this whole thing, unfortunately, is this.
Well, it depends on how many people
game.
were involved in it. Like, that's the
Yeah,
thing.
and it
This is
also
something that
depends if you, like-
instead of being pariahs, it could be a civil war.
It would have to be like a collective, like you have to
it-
basically get the other people to agree, right? And then you can
Yeah.
like
Which
a,
I think
that
I think
has to happen.
is reasonable, like in terms of it actually being possible. But now this line of conversation has kind of got me thinking: are there any reviewers that have, I guess, interacted with you guys where you can say like they do either ask for peer review or like they do want to know your opinion specifically?
Yeah,
I feel like it's worth
technical
calling
stuff
these people
fairly
out.
regularly.
Not usually
Well, for
asking
you,
for like
obviously.
a video, but
no, I've had Joe ask for peer and
Gadgetry Tech.
same
Yes.
with Varun. Shoutouts to both of those.
I don't know if people know his name, but
VSG. Sorry.
Because like this, I mean, if I post a
same.
video that I'd like for certain people to do, like I would be very curious to hear Blaine's comments on like certain videos I'd done.
I mean,
but then there's
well,
other
we all
people
want to get
where-
roasted by Blaine. That's not new. That's why we're.
I mean,
all
there's
here.
certain reviewers that will make a video on things that we put out, whether we want them to or not. In fact, it's guaranteed.
Screaming endlessly into the void.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't even bother watching those.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I think it would be a good thing to see more of, to be honest, because it also
Hobby
helps
Talk
people to
does not want to waste our time. Man, don't be so harsh on yourself. And also spell
Please
waste
our
correctly.
time. Like,
But don't
you
be
don't
so
understand.
harsh on yourself, except for the spelling.
He means
I
waste
waste
in that
time
sense.
on people that are not my friends. I would much rather it was my friends coming to me and talking to me about stuff.
Golden, what were you saying?
Yeah, sorry, please continue.
I actually forgot.
Oh, nice.
I think I was just mentioning that, like, I think generally speaking, peer review and sort of commentary on other people's reviews would lead to positive and constructive discussions, kind of like what we've had through some of this podcast. But it would need to be done in a way where, as said, you invite it rather than it just
everyone
being
knows
done.
what they're signing up for.
Well, the thing is,
exactly.
There's really only two ways this can be, though. Either A, it's so uncommon that nobody pays attention to it, or B, it becomes so ubiquitous that not submitting yourself to peer review would make you a pariah. So there's really no scenario where this is actually going to be both impactful and not compulsive to people.
Playing the long game.
It's true.
Okay.
I was gonna say, I don't want to be spending like loads of time. Reviews already take up a lot of time. I don't want to be spending loads of time making videos about other people's videos all the time.
I think that
really should be more than happy to help, just like talking to them, though, give feedback. That's always welcomed, and
this is where hostility is helpful.
But see, this is I was going to
because
say,
with hostility, you only need to do like a video every quarter, every year about a given channel. You don't need to respond to every review. You just have a compilation of this is why this channel is bad.
So we're not going to do this, but the unprompted, deliberately, openly hostile videos get way more attention and way more views. And we won't be doing those, but
if we wanted more views, we'd just get sued more, to be honest.
There's that too, yeah.
I want that, to be clear.
I know Blaine.
I really don't. I really don't.
We know Blaine.
Yeah, Blaine just wants.
I do want to shout out one other reviewer who has come to me fairly regularly for both opinions on their opinions, but also clarification of some of the nerd shit. Timmy, formerly from Giz Audio and currently of the Hangout, he deeply cares about giving all of you the correct information. So both be gentle if you find you disagree, and maybe check him out if you haven't yet. He's a good guy.
Someone in chat says, please don't do a Linus and bow to the algo. Have you seen Linus Sebastian's house? If we could do a Linus, we would.
That's just because you're
Unfortunately,
a super fan. I personally would not.
I'm not a super fan. I just want to have fucking $50 million.
Marcel says reviews of people reviewing more mainstream products like the Sony ANC headphones or AirPods Max would, because a lot of normies think that's the best audio product you can buy. That would be interesting. Kind of like when Kryn reviewed the TikTokers.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's a bit of a different thing.
Well, it's
because they're not in our sphere.
same...
That's
well, yeah. I mean, that's those ones. You're pretty much just shooting fish in a barrel. But I mean, why not?
Davina Duckworth says, "Is it better to be a headphone reviewer or headphone influencer?" I think the answer there is influencer.
Well, better in what sense? For you?
Yes.
Definitely influencer.
Yes. better for
the world?
Yeah. I mean, this is one where it becomes a distinction without a difference, right? Sort of. Or it can become a distinction without a difference. Bingo for anybody who is still doing that. But I think that there is, I think that it's like, who would you rather be, the person who doesn't have to bother with an audience that cares about the nerd shit, right? That's what it comes down to. And yeah, I think there's very good merit in being that person who doesn't have an audience who cares about the nerd shit.
That's fair.
Are there more
Any
good
other spicy takes? Oh,
or bad takes?
Drama videos are
Someone
welcome.
asked what our
It gives us
opinion on
something to
sound
do.
demos is.
We've done that one.
I think
already
we've
talked about
beaten that one to death.
Yeah. Capra says drama videos are welcome. It gives us something to do in this hobby that's juicy, especially for people who can't afford to buy the flavor of the month headphone.
I think the thing with drama videos is that there are certain times where drama is necessary for the benefit of the space as a whole, or just because something incorrect has been done. I would argue that
usually it's actively polluting this space.
Yes. Like, I had the threat to get sued and sort of made a video on that because I felt that it was fairly important to do so and affected other reviews.
Blaine nodding and smiling, like that was one of the good ones.
Well, the MQA video. I didn't do the MQA video because I thought this will get loads of clicks. I thought it was an interesting topic and actually quite important to talk about, and no one else had actually done that sort of analysis before. Just going after people because there is an opportunity to make a drama video, even though it'll do well algorithmically or whatever, I don't think is a good idea. I think
here's a question.
Generally speaking, being more collaborative and constructive is better than just trying to incite arguments.
Here's a question.
It would not be sustainable.
If you sold candy, would you put cocaine in it if you had the opportunity?
I probably wouldn't, Blaine.
Yeah. Okay. So
Jesus
I think
Christ.
that is basically the question that splits pro versus anti-drama.
Wait. Are you saying to sell or to have for myself?
To sell.
Oh. Then probably no.
Yeah.
But your livelihood depends on it, Andrew.
Okay. So chat says yes. My point here is this is something that makes the world worse. Drama in general is something that makes the world worse, but it sells.
Mm-hmm.
So does cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
We should get into both of those.
I mean,
it's a terrible take.
No,
I got one more good one. A little bit back, but
I was going to say that's a good way to end it.
Every reviewer ought to redo every or the main reviews annually to keep up with the changing taste / understanding.
I don't hate that at all.
So
I don't think it's a bad take, but oh my god, it's
the work
impractical.
Involved. Yeah.
If we had full time, annually is too often. Every 3 years, if we had some spare full-time editors and you don't mind all the B-roll being reused and whatnot, then maybe.
If the SKUs are still sold in like a
revisiting
1 year, 2 year, 3 year period,
your opinion
revisiting
so different.
Okay.
Right? Like
Griffin, can you send them the spreadsheet we've been working on?
Yeah.
We wanted to come up with a decision matrix for should we review things. So I made a spreadsheet. Do not put this on stream, obviously, but
I'm absolutely not doing that.
Yeah, but it includes it basically has factors for is this a good idea, a meh, or a bad idea, and one of them is like we should be re-reviewing stuff that's been a while.
Yeah.
I'd be down for that because it is interesting.
We just have a totally different perspective now, right? And
honestly, I think that a year-end roundup wouldn't actually be a terrible way to do that, or something like where at some regular interval you say, 2 years ago, I said that the HiFiMan Sundara is a great mid-fi headphone. With the price changes or whatever, how do I feel about it now? 2 years ago, I said that you should get the HD6XX over anything. Now, let's say the price has risen to $400. Do I still say that?
The problem is also like you have product revisions too, and it's like maybe the current model is not the same.
Yeah.
This is a list that doesn't exist for me. There's nothing
on it. It's just
there's
look
something
at
on
the
it.
other.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Look at the
No, I mean,
look at the tab on the bottom. It's just like
so you haven't actually made it. You just have started.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So look at the legend section.
Yeah.
And this is all, I just did this all up with conditional formatting, basically under the logic of once we have this, we can now populate it with all the different headphones we either haven't reviewed or have reviewed. And with this info, we will be able to figure out, should we do a review of this?
I think this is great. Yeah. Yeah. Having some sort of, because oftentimes it's like the issue that you often run into. I mean, I'm not alone in this, but if you have a ton of products coming out over a small period of time, you really do have to make a decision around like what are you going to dedicate your time to, and you can't cover everything. So having some easy way to be like, okay, does this tick these boxes, etc. Okay, we're doing this one, right? That would be very, very helpful.
I have a related, somewhat spicy take, which is that when a product comes out and it's from a company or space that I know sort of releases something every 5 minutes, I have, regardless of how good it may be or that people are saying it is, I have much, much less interest in reviewing it when I know that it's only going to be relevant for about 10 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like there's a bunch of different companies.
Why we don't review a lot of Chi-Fi IEMs.
And it's like, I think there would be a lot more negative reviews if we did cover everything that would not stand the like there'd be a lot more negative reviews. Like it would just be like,
there's an argument that maybe we should do that.
Oh yeah, but like how much, you only have so much time, right?
Yeah, we can't do 20 reviews a week.
Yeah, and like you will.
There's also an argument that like
right?
There's also an argument that like our current like approach to reviews, like maybe it's a little bit too long form, a little bit too high effort. Like I feel like for something like just like
it depends. It honestly
a bunch of Chi-Fi IEMs that have come out over like the last 3 months or something like that.
I have a different solution.
A full-time editor.
That problem? Yeah. No, my solution is this. This doesn't just happen in our industry, right? Like this happens in all kinds of other industries where like if you have a certain audience, right? You get inundated with brands wanting to send you stuff. But the problem is so much of it is just like crap, or it's just like not
shovelware.
It's
the most beige of products.
Yeah, even if there are things within that category, there are still, even if there are gems there, the problem is that you can't dedicate time to covering everything. So here's my solution for this. You package all that stuff into one video, and you basically just run through everything in very short form in that video, and then you're able to pull out the gems from it as a result, right? And that way the actual work that goes into it isn't any more than one dedicated video for a specific product that is actually going to stand the test of time, and you get to cover everything as a result. And you also get to point out the stuff that's crap that exists in this pile.
Why don't we do a video that is literally called Flavors of the Month? We do it once a month, and we just cover all of the tiny little things that we never
touch.
It's
exactly
Someone in chat literally suggested that. They were like, why don't you just do a video every month this is all the crap from this month?
I suggested this 2 years ago. Or it was at least 1.5 years ago. And basically, it was going to be a monthly roundup of this is what initially prompted the idea of, I used to do the live streams as the backlog. That's what it was originally supposed to be. And where it was just like, I had all this pile of stuff. All right, let's just go through all of it. And it could be, it's kind of like, it's kind of like repackaging worthless stocks.
Yeah, pretty much. Just want to say thanks to everyone on YouTube for tuning into the weekly content production meeting as well, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
And we appreciate your input as well. It's good to have outside voices. Also, there was a comment from Eric Schmidt on that point. I honestly don't care about the video production quality of a headphone review. The only B-roll I need is a graph. Obviously, that's wrong. You do need more B-roll than that. Like, you need to actually see the headphone.
But the production quality itself doesn't need to be high.
This is something I've been talking to Douglas about, because obviously Douglas has the highest production quality of all of us. I really think that there's probably some value to differentiating between like just like a snapshot review, something kind of analogous to how LTT does the unboxings or unboxing therapies. Just like box open, this is how it feels, this is how it sounds. 7 minutes, minimal number of cuts, done. Throw it up.
Yeah, shorter format doesn't need to be this, hype. But there's a value in doing the, hyper well produced stuff too, right?
It's I think that both of them
it's just
have
every product is not worth
also,
that.
Yeah, a lot of them aren't actually. Like a lot of
when
products,
there is
most of them
really
are not
good. When there's a really good product, though, I want to put more effort into the video.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I think that's
or if
actually...
it's a really bad product, like really
you can
bad.
Tell how good the product is based on the production quality.
No,
it's more like absolute value from neutral. Like if it's really bad or really good, it gets a lot of time. If it's in the middle,
you start filming with like just a shitty webcam, and that's it.
No, but I'm serious. I think this is a good idea because there's a whole bunch of stuff that right now we basically don't cover because it's beneath our notice, right?
Well, actually,
because it doesn't merit making a good video.
If it's a bad IEM, you only get 360p video.
No. What I do is I just send it over. I send it out to Caleb.
I love that idea.
I don't want to cover this, so off it goes to Caleb.
Poor Caleb.
He can do a short.
Caleb is a fucking trooper.
Oh my god, is he ever, dude? And his okay, this is no shade to anybody else who provides written content, but like his writing is exceptional. Like very, very accessible. And yeah.
He's one of my two favorite reviewers. No shade to anyone else in this call.
That means that only one of the other people in this call can be your other favorite reviewer, and possibly
no offense to them, but it's neither of them.
It's Kyle.
Is it Kyle?
It's Kyle.
That's what I thought. I love Kyle.
Yeah.
So
I also like
someone in the chat says Zeos has not great production value, no graphs, and most of his stuff is basically a single take, right?
Yeah. His thing is just that he's charismatic.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is we could do something that is almost that slapdash and that takes very little time. Like, think about how long it takes you at a show to assess how you think about a headphone, right? It ain't that long.
I wouldn't review something based on that.
No, exactly.
There's a difference between the production quality of the video versus how long you spent. Like, you need to spend at least some proper time with the product before you can review it, even if you are just doing a GoPro on forehead.
How much time?
That's a good question.
I think it depends on how good or bad it is.
You
don't need very long to know that something is horrible.
Is bad, but actually, like the degrees of like, okay, is this good or is it great? That does become a bit tricky. And I come across this where I'll form an opinion based on however much, doesn't even matter how much time. I'll form an opinion of product. I will work through the process of reviewing it and editing it and doing all that, right? And then at the end of that, I will do another assessment and go, is this correct? Is what I've said here, what I've put together here, correct? And sometimes it's not. Sometimes my opinion has changed based on that distance. So I don't think it's a matter of you actually need to spend that much time listening. I just think you need to have enough time so that you can have that like, oh no, wait, this isn't quite right moment where you can have time to change your opinion.
How much time? Like how much time in total does one need to judge a headphone?
I think at least a week. But it depends on what, like if you're sitting
how many headphones could you be doing concurrently in that week? So you could listen to headphones.
The point that's not quite the point though. The point is more that you need time to not think about the headphone for a while and come at it a second time, right? And
so you listen to it on Monday.
You could be doing it, you could be doing like anything else in that amount of time. So it's not about you're actually spending that much time with the headphone. It's just to give yourself a certain amount of time to be able to have that sort of second check, right? Like the double gut check, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and, Super Review makes a good point, which is that if you're excited for something, you need at least a week to see if the excitement lasts. That honeymoon period is a real thing.
Yeah,
for sure.
And no, but to Blaine's point, you could be doing this every day. Could be a different thing. You could stagger, and you could just do it with like a GoPro or whatever. I think there's also other questions though, like surrounding like, do you want this to be like? There are style and tone considerations, right, for how you want to present what you're putting out into the world. And I do agree, though, like it doesn't need to always be the same thing for every product. But I still like the solution of
quantity
like just
has a quality all its own.
It does, yeah. But I still think that there's the real benefit there is something to figure out, like packaging the all the stuff that you get sent into one. I'll give you an example where something actually turned out great from that random stuff of just flavor of the month stuff. It wasn't for me. It was Chronicle's example. The 7 Hertz Timeless wouldn't have been something that was necessarily on people's radar, but turned out of the blue to be a thing that people loved, right? Like people's issues with it notwithstanding, right? It turned out to be this massive success that just sort of came out of nowhere. And so there is
a good
value.
case for casting a wide net.
Exactly. So I do think there's something there, and how you go about actually, delivering that, is I think there's many different ways to skin that cat, basically. We do need to end this because otherwise
we have a spicy question.
We need to end this. So
I kind of got to wrap up.
Yeah, last one.
Oh, okay.
I want to know how you guys like your steaks.
I go rare or medium rare.
Yeah, same.
So rare that they're still alive.
Just
if it's
Why are you like this?
Good place.
Oh no, I'm fucking vegetarian.
Oh. I totally forgot about it. I thought you were just being contrarian. Yeah,
he eats the mushroom from the field.
Yeah.
He likes his mushrooms extra rare. All right. On that terrible disappointment, we do need to end. As usual, guys, this is available in podcast form. If, again, for some reason you want to watch this again, I don't know why you would want to do that, but you can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, probably. It'll be available. It takes a bit for it to populate, so it'll probably be available next week. But as usual, all this, once again, is made possible by headphones.com. Blaine, if you want to plug headphones.com because you do such a good job of it.
All right. Headphones.com is your #1 place to learn about and buy audio equipment, not just headphones. We also carry speakers, some cables, and probably at least one DAC or amp that's a good idea to buy.
Do we carry any fuses?
No, we do not carry fuses. In fact, we have a shortage of fuses at the office. I actually have things here that have Taryn took the fuses out of this. Good job, Taryn, written on them. But no, it's a great place to buy gear. It's a great place to buy stuff if you would like us to keep our jobs, which we'd very much like. It comes with a community, both on Discord and on our forum. You can access both of them from links in the video description, well, VOD description here. Please buy stuff from there.
So ignore everything.
365-day return policy.
Yeah, ignore everything. All of Blaine's cynical takes about headphones and buy things.
Buy something bad from us so that we can survive. It's a sacrifice on your part for us.
That's
and yes, if it is bad, we have 365-day returns. So if you do buy something bad, you can return it and get something else bad.
There you go. Or something good. You could. There's a chance.
There's a chance.
We do have some of those, I think. I'm pretty sure.
We have some good headphones.
Yeah. Okay. And with that terrible outro, we'll let you guys go and have a great weekend.
Bye, everyone.
Griffin,
do I have to end it?